Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Jiraiya takes Naruto with him to travel globe and trains him with Nagato part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Water style. Raging waves. Yahiko declared his jutsu as a wave surged forward at the shadow clone of Jiraiya. Paper shuriken. Konan also cried out, and paper in the form of shuriken swirled around her and was sent flying at the shadow clone as well. Last, but not least, Nagato put his hands together and shouted, wind style. Gale palm. Wind rushed forth and aided the water and the paper shuriken. The combined attack aimed at the shadow clone with precision and hit him dead on. The shadow clone didn't stand a chance, and he popped. How was that, sensei? Yahiko called out and pumped his fist in the air. Jiraiya chuckled at the boy's enthusiasm. Oh ho. You can take down my shadow clone down now, huh? Jiraiya walked over to his three beloved students and smiled. The three of them turned to him and smiled back, and Yahiko brought his fist back down. Jiraiya breathed a sigh of relief. Well then, I can return home now without any worries. Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan appeared shell-shocked at the sudden news, and the triumphant atmosphere was lost. Jiraiya reiterated his declaration. You three are all on your own from here on out. Jiraiya said while grinning with closed eyes. You've done a great job these past 3 years. The three orphans from Rain were too shocked and sad to say anything. Even Yahiko began to shed tears, and he always berated Nagato for that. All the while, rain continued to fall down around them, adding to the gloomy atmosphere. Heh. Don't cry, Yahiko, or people will call you a coward. Jiraiya went on, repeating the warning that the boy always gave Nagato. Konan, you're going to grow up to be a real beauty. I know it. I hope we meet again someday. This land is destitute, so there will be hard times ahead. But from this point forward, you three can change the fate of this land. As he was saying his parting words, Jiraiya turned around and began walking away. Naturally, the three orphans couldn't accept this farewell, so Nagato and Konan both began to walk in the direction Jiraiya was going, but Konan didn't make it as far as Nagato, who was stopped in his tracks by Jiraiya. Nagato, you three have really grown up, wouldn't you agree? At last, Nagato managed to find his voice. Frowning, he murmured more to himself than Jiraiya. Thank you, sensei. Now, at one time, that would have been the end of that, and the family of Jiraiya, Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan would have been broken up. The three orphans from Rain would have gone on to establish an insurgent group within the Rain village and eventually earn the attention of Hanzo the Salamander, which would inevitably have led to the death of Yahiko and start a chain of events that would have shaken the shinobi world to its very core. However, in another time, this was not farewell. In another time, Yahiko did not accept Jiraiya-sensei just up and leaving like that. Life in Rain country was hell. It was situated precariously between 3 of the 5 great nations and was a constant battleground, especially in wartime. And it didn't help that Hanzo had changed quite drastically from how he once was. He was now very much a tyrant and a paranoid one at that. Yahiko's dream was to save the hidden Rain village and overthrow Hanzo, but then the 3 of them had met Jiraiya, newly christened as one of the Sannin, by the very one that they were aiming to overthrow. They had been wary of the man at first because he was a leaf ninja and the hidden leaf had in no way attempted to help quell the fighting in Rain country. But after 3 years of living under one roof, Jiraiya had become a father figure for the 3 orphans who had known nothing but war for much of their young lives. He was genuinely sorry about all the fighting going on and he had a similar dream of bringing peace to this accursed shinobi world. He made them laugh, he comforted them when they wept, and he willingly taught them the skills to become shinobi. They weren't even from the land of fire, and yet he had done all of this for them, like they were his own children. They knew he would one day return to the hidden leaf, though. He had to return to his own home and help his own people. It was wartime, after all. They just didn't expect it to be so soon, nor the fact that they would become this attached to the man. He wasn't just a father figure, he practically was their father, at least to the 3 of them. None of them were related by blood, but that didn't stop them from being a family. And their father was just going to leave, now that they were able to defend themselves. Yahiko used his arm to wipe his tears away, and then he clenched his fists. No. This isn't the end, Yahiko screamed. He can't just leave. Konan and Nagato turned to their friend, surprised by his sudden outburst. Jiraiya was out of earshot. Yahiko, Konan murmured quietly. She didn't want it all to end either, but what choice did they have? She continued, barely above a whisper. Jiraiya-sensei has to return home, he can't stay idle forever, not when a war is going on. Yahiko shook with anger. But he wasn't mad at Konan. I know that. So why don't we just follow him home? Nagato and Konan stared at him with gaping mouths. The idea was unheard of, and yet, what about your dream, Yahiko? Nagato questioned his friend. We were going to bring peace to this land. Yahiko nodded emphatically. Turning in the direction that Jiraiya had gone, Yahiko confirmed that was still the plan. And we will. But think about it. Jiraiya-sensei also dreams about peace. He can't be the only one in his village like that. We can set up a base and gather supporters from there. Nagato remained silent after Yahiko's reasoning. He had a point, but still. We can do the same thing here, Yahiko. We're not the only ones tired of the current regime. Could you guarantee that people in the Hidden Leaf would assist us? Conan asked when Nagato wouldn't. That reasoning didn't waver Yahiko's decision in the least. He could be stubborn when he wanted to be. Conan, I'm not just doing it for the sake of helping our country anymore. We're not the only ones suffering. I have a feeling that with our efforts, combined with Sensei's, we can bring peace to the world. Besides, hasn't the past 3 years been the best we've ever lived? Do you really want to give that up? Conan looked down dejectedly. She didn't even have to answer that one. But what about the Hidden Leaf? How can you know that they'll accept us? Conan pleaded Yahiko to answer. Nagato awaited his friend's reply. Sensei will vouch for us. And even if that won't be, we will overthrow Hanzo one day, but wouldn't it be great to have Sensei and the Hidden Leaf help us do that? Sensei trusted and helped us even when we weren't from his country, and I'm absolutely certain he'd help fulfill our goal of liberating Rain Country in a heartbeat. It's only fair for us to offer our assistance, too. I don't even want to think of us and them anymore. When we bring about a peaceful world, there certainly won't be any of that. All was quiet after Yahiko's speech. When Yahiko's mind was made up, nothing could deter him. And his reasoning made an awful lot of sense. For a while, Nagato had been inwardly debating whether or not to go along with Yahiko's new plan of action, and Yahiko's speech finally convinced him. I will come, too, Yahiko. Sensei has done much for us, and it is only fair to repay him even a little for the 3 years he lived with us. And you are right, we shouldn't be selfish in bringing peace to just our home. Yahiko grinned at his friend and gave him a thumbs up. What about you, Conan? Yahiko asked, turning to his other dear friend. Conan closed her eyes and bit her lip. There was so much uncertainty, and yet both Yahiko and Nagato were willing to go through with following Jiraiya home, thus leaving theirs. She wanted to wait and think it over, but she knew how rash Yahiko could be. And Nagato was a firm believer in Yahiko's ideals, so, smiling tentatively, Conan gave her answer. Doesn't look like I have much choice, does it? Yahiko laughed joyfully. Alright. Let's set out right now. But before he got too far, Nagato and Conan reminded him they would need provisions for the journey, just in case. 10 minutes later, the 3 orphans said farewell to the home that they had come to know for the past 3 years, and set out. Nagato clutched the keepsake that their sensei had left behind, his first ever novel, and ran in formation with Conan and Yahiko. The journey into the Land of Fire was very different for the 3 orphans of Rain Country. For one, they got to see the sun for much longer than they ever did back home. And for two, the ecology was vastly different. With no ever-present rain, trees and lush grass were allowed to grow freely. Well, more than was allowed back home, anyway. The 3 orphans could have easily stopped to admire and appreciate the change in scenery, but they were all too focused on their destination. The Hidden Leaf Village. They hadn't been stopped by border patrol, surprisingly. A battle must have been brewing nearby, or the Leaf Shinobi were sloppy at border patrol. Yeah, probably the former. How far away is this place? Conan called out as the 3 kept running non-stop. Yahiko laughed heartily. The Land of Fire is bigger than our little country, Conan. Just relax. We'll reach it eventually. Conan sent the orange-haired boy a deadpan look, but didn't dignify him with a retort. Nagato wordlessly watched the two as they darted along the road. Conan did have a point, they really should have looked at a map. For all they knew, the Hidden Leaf was days away, and they had passed Jiraiya a long way back. But then again, Jiraiya-sensei would have noticed them if they did. Besides, they'd only been running at a decent pace for 5 hours. Jiraiya wouldn't stop to take a break yet probably. There was always the possibility they passed him and just missed him, he was more trained in the shinobi arts, after all. Pushing thoughts of Jiraiya-sensei to the back of his mind, Nagato's thoughts drifted to the Hidden Leaf. What would it be like? What would the people be like? Truth be told, Nagato still had some concerns about this little change in plans. Yahiko was very convincing with his speech, but it was also true that Leaf Shinobi killed his parents, believing them to be shinobi themselves. No matter how strong the Hidden Leaf was, the people there could still make mistakes, just like anywhere else. It was highly possible that they could be perceived as spies upon reaching the village. Nagato shook his head to clear away the doubts. Everything would be fine. It might be a little tough at first, but they would adjust. No doubt about it. But still Nagato wondered as they raced along the dirt path. Needless to say, Nagato's doubts resurfaced once the 3 orphans reached the front gate of the Leaf Village. Halt. Stat your names, ranks, and intentions. A man in a green Chunin vest shouted at the 3 wayward children. The 3 tensed but swiftly obeyed. My name's Yahiko and these are my friends Nagato and Conan. We're from the Hidden Rain Village, but we hold no shinobi rank Hamo, and we're here because Jiraiya-sensei finally returned home, and we didn't want to leave him. Yahiko finished off kind of weakly. The two Chunin on front gate duty listened to Yahiko's introduction but didn't appear as if they believed a word of it. I think you three better come with me to see Lord Hokage. The same Chunin spoke and stood up. Moving outside of the small booth, the Chunin motioned for them to follow him. Hesitantly, the three orphans followed the Chunin. The Hokage was the leader of the Leaf Village and they were nervous about meeting with him without seeing Jiraiya again first. But if they attempted to flee and find Jiraiya on their own, their actions could land them in prison. Also, they were only trained to defend themselves. If they attacked Leaf Shinobi, it would reflect badly on Jiraiya and the three children didn't wish for that to happen. Perhaps they should have thought a little more before checking in at the gate. Sneaking into the village would have been deemed suspicious, but would it really have been more of a hassle? Yahiko wondered a bit at this. So, you three are from the Hidden Rain village, Hiruzen Sarutobi puffed on his pipe and casually clasped his hands together on his desk as he sat behind it. His piercing eyes gave each orphan a thorough glance. They seemed harmless, but you could never be too careful. That's right. Yahiko took a step forward, but an Anbu bodyguard held up his hand for the boy to stop. Jiraiya-sensei trained us for 3 years and then just left us. We want to live here with him. Those 3 years were the best of our lives. Konan and Nagato shot Yahiko curious glances. True, he was at liberty to admit all this and he was probably obligated to. But did he really need to make them sound so desperate? Hiruzen frowned and leaned back, setting the pipe on his desk. Do you have any way to authenticate your story? Hiruzen calmly asked. It was true that Jiraiya wrote back to him constantly about 3 orphans for the past 3 years, but never revealed what you know to the potential enemy. Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan shared looks between one another. They could easily request that Jiraiya be summoned to authenticate their story, but each one felt that wasn't the right thing to do in this situation. Not yet. They communicated that gut feeling to each other through their eyes, but they were back at square one. How to go about proving that their story was true? Nagato's eyes dawned with realization and he reached into his cloak. An action that provoked the Anbu to clutch his tanto in anticipation for an attack on the Hokage. Hiruzen motioned for the Anbu to stand down and Nagato pulled out Jiraiya's first novel. Tales of the Gutsy Ninja. Hiruzen beckoned him forward and Nagato stepped forward to place the book on the Hokage's desk. Then he stepped back in line with Yahiko and Konan. Hiruzen hummed thoughtfully as he skimmed through the book. The book was definitely in his student's handwriting, but Hiruzen couldn't recall Jiraiya ever writing a book. Turning to the back cover, he read the little note about the author and what inspired him to write the book. With a weary sigh, the Hokage nodded gravely. Summon Jiraiya here at once. Another Anbu that was outside one of the windows shined away to do just what the Hokage ordered. The Hokage resumed skimming the book, but he eased the orphans' fears a little. I can certainly tell that this is my student's handiwork. Smirking at their shocked faces, Hiruzen continued. It's not his usual style, but it's most definitely his handwriting. And the author's note seems to indicate that it is him who wrote the book, as no enemy shinobi should have knowledge of his personal information. However, we just need to eliminate any doubt. Jiraiya should be all the confirmation I need. He is eccentric, but I would trust him with my life. A few minutes later, the Anbu shined back and Jiraiya entered the Hokage's office through one of the windows. I came as soon as I got your summons. What's up, sensei? Jiraiya trailed off weakly as he gazed at the 3 youth before him once again. Hiruzen chuckled at his student's shock. But he answered back in a serious tone. These 3 seem to know you, Jiraiya. Do you care to confirm if this is true? Jiraiya rubbed his eyes and then attempted to dispel a genjutsu in case one was indeed active. But the 3 orphans were still there. But how? Why? Nagato, Konan, Yahiko, I thought you were going to liberate the Rain Village. You don't need me anymore. Yahiko was the one to step forward this time. Sensei, you were our father for 3 years, how could you possibly think that we would simply let you walk away? Jiraiya stuttered profusely. But then he sighed. He had to confess to himself that he felt a similar close connection with each orphan. I can't go back with you, I'm sorry. I want to with all my heart, but Yahiko grinned cheekily at Sensei. Good. Cause we're moving in with you. Cue the sputtering once more. But how are you going to achieve your dream here? Nagato stepped forward one more time. Sensei, you made us realize that there are more hurting people out there than just us in the Hidden Rain. We want to combine our world peace efforts with yours and bring about a better world. We will liberate the Hidden Rain, but first we want to repay you for all you did for us. Konan stepped forward at last. Please, Sensei, Konan asked with pleading eyes. Jiraiya never could resist those eyes. Jiraiya was still sputtering when Hiruzen spoke up again and chuckled. It seems you have a family that doesn't want to part with you, Jiraiya. I am happy for you. I will bring this before the council and make it official. Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato will be granted citizenship here in the Hidden Leaf. And if they so choose, they may take the Genin test. We will see if what you have taught them will be enough for them to become loyal shinobi of the Leaf. And if not, remedial classes may be taken at their leisure. I would hate to dismiss such passionate students, Jiraiya. Jiraiya blinked surprisingly, but then gave the Hokage a grave look. But if you take it before the council. Hiruzen held up his hand and Jiraiya ceased talking. Leave it to me, Jiraiya. I will not let the council turn away these three. They have no doubt seen much while living in the Hidden Rain village, perhaps too much. They will be placed with you for the time being, as I cannot guarantee them other residents at this point in time. Nagato, Okay, now that the written exam is over, we move on to the Taijutsu portion of the exam. The next day, Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato had woken up early to go and take the Genin exam. Because they hadn't taken part in the academy's curriculum, they had to be tested in everything in order to ascertain where they were at. The orphans weren't so educated on history of the Hidden Leaf, but they answered what they could, including practical knowledge. And now the rest of the exam would be demonstrating that practical knowledge. Naturally, the taijutsu that the orphans did learn wasn't the basic academy style, and so the proctors for that portion of the exam were in for a shock when the orphans actually managed to land blows on them. Nagato winced as Yahiko delivered a swift blow to the back of one Chunin's neck after getting behind him with astonishing speed. Oh, the Chunin got back up, but if that had been a real battle, the Chunin could very well have been killed for underestimating the enemy. You're going too easy on me, sir. Come on. The Chunin grumbled and got back up. Dusting himself off, the Chunin shook his head. I've seen all that I need to see from you. Your fighting style is unorthodox for a beginner, let alone a genin, but I suppose that's what you get when you learn from Jiraiya and not from the academy. Next. Konan was up next, and she, too, throttled her opponent. Jiraiya had made sure to drill taijutsu into all three orphans hard. Ninjutsu wouldn't always work, and taijutsu would serve as an excellent last line of defense. None of the three chose to specialize in taijutsu, jinjutsu, or ninjutsu, even if Yahiko was particularly skilled in taijutsu. Their reasoning was that if they ran into an enemy shinobi that knew how to counteract their specialties, then they could be beaten with ease. And so, the three orphans made sure to train in ninjutsu, jinjutsu, and taijutsu. Jiraiya approved of their training method, even if he himself was bad at jinjutsu. Still, he told them what he could about jinjutsu, and had even brought in the toads to help tutor them in the arts of jinjutsu. Nagato was curious about summonings, but Jiraiya told him, at the time, that he wasn't ready to sign a summoning contract yet, too inexperienced. Well, it appeared that he would be able to learn it from Jiraiya at a later date now. After Nagato put his opponent through the ringer, the three passed the taijutsu portion of the genin exam with flying colors. Next up was the clone technique, and then they had to demonstrate their accuracy with shuriken. Finally, after several more tests, the three orphans from the Rain Village had demonstrated their worth as genin of the Leaf Village. Jiraiya had trained them quite efficiently in 3 years. Granted, they were only genin, though. They had the potential to be of higher rank, particularly Nagato, but due to politics, they would rise up through the ranks the traditional way. They would work hard in the years to come to prove their worth to the Hokage, the Leaf Village, and the Land of Fire. Unfortunately, because Jiraiya already had his own team of genin, they were unable to train under him beyond getting the occasional pointer from him. Still, the third Hokage showed compassion on them and had them placed under Tsunade's tutelage. Tsunade was not amused as she had quite recently lost her loved ones, but she reluctantly obeyed the will of the Hokage and became a Jonin sensei. But as soon as they had made Chunin, she was gone, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Put some back into it, brats. Tsunade barked. Yahiko laughed. Yeah, Konan, put some back into it. Konan smirked and shook her head from the branch she was perched upon. She'd already gotten the tree walking exercise down pat. Nagato had it down, but it needed a little more finesse, so he was still practicing. Yahiko, on the other hand. Yahiko, that's enough slacking off. Get back to it. Tsunade addressed Yahiko. Yahiko grumbled and returned to failing miserably at the exercise. Meanwhile, Nagato had his way up to the tree branch that Konan was on and sat next to her to take a breather. Contrary to Yahiko, Nagato hadn't stopped practicing since starting in the wee hours of the morning. He was bushed, to say the least. Good job, Nagato. Konan told her friend and beamed at him. Nagato rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and watched Yahiko run at a tree, make 5 steps up it, and fall back down. Thanks, but it still needs finessing. You seem to have perfect chakra control, Konan. Konan nodded astutely and turned her attention back to their frustrated friend below. Tsunade-sensei wants to start me on water walking today. I'm sure she'd be fine with starting you on it, too, since you've been working hard. Nagato rubbed his chin. Well, I'll give it a shot, but I hear that water walking requires more precise chakra control. I'm not too bad at tree walking, but I'll probably seem really bad at water walking. Konan giggled. I'm sure you'll do fine, Nagato, don't sell yourself short. Nagato shrugged nonchalantly and the two watched their friend in silence. They would help and give him pointers, but Tsunade forbade that. Konan and Nagato both managed the exercise on their own, so it was only fair for Yahiko to work it out on his own. Tsunade gave Nagato a breather before making her neck. Alright, since Nagato and Konan seem to be adequate at the exercise, I'm going to move them on to water walking. Yahiko, I'll be checking on you in a little bit. Don't slack off, I will know. Yahiko grinned nervously as his sensei shot him a warning glance before motioning for Konan and Nagato to follow her. However, before Nagato left, he made a hand seal and made a shadow clone. It was true that they were only genin, but Jiraiya thought Nagato could handle the Jonin level technique because he possessed the Rinnegan. And it was a smashing success. Nagato's chakra reserves were unreal. Nagato could create more shadow clones than anyone else in the village by a long shot. And that was shadow clones, not the typical clone. Nagato didn't need to explain to his shadow clone what he wanted him to do, so Nagato took off after Konan and Tsunade sensei after making the shadow clone so as to not arouse suspicion. The shadow clone of Nagato made his way over to the orange-haired boy who was panting on the ground. Knew you wouldn't abandon me, Nagato. Yahiko giggled gleefully. The shadow clone rolled his eyes and folded his arms across his chest. Perform the exercise and I'll tell you what you're doing wrong. My Dijutsu might not work like the Sharingan or the Byakugan in seeing chakra flow, but I know the telltale signs of any mistakes you might make. Yahiko nodded and attempted to ascend the tree again, making 6 steps up this time. Well? What's the verdict? Yahiko eagerly asked, once more flat on the ground. Nagato looked up the tree in contemplation, hiding his small grin as best as he could. Oh, he knew exactly where Yahiko went wrong, Nagato didn't even need that demonstration to prove it. Secretly, Nagato got a laugh out of seeing Yahiko scale the tree and fall down, but it was all in good fun, and not because he enjoyed watching Yahiko fail. Nagato considered his advice carefully. The reason Tsunade sensei didn't want them to help each other with this exercise was because they couldn't be babied for their whole career, and getting that lesson drilled into their head now would help them out in the long run. Naturally they were supposed to trust in their allies to cover their backs, but they shouldn't depend on their allies so they could make rash mistakes. Observe the tree. That is all I will tell you, Yahiko. What? Come on, Nagato. What am I doing wrong? Yahiko whined, staring up at his crimson-haired friend. The shadow clone shook his head and dispelled. Yahiko would work it out. Yahiko twitched at his friend's seemingly unwillingness to help. Seriously. Observe the tree. What the heck was that supposed to mean? Nagato could have gone into more detail than that. Growling, Yahiko stood up and dusted himself off. Looking up at the tree, all Yahiko could see were the indentations of his footprints. That was typical, right? Turning to the tree that Konan had scaled on her first try, Yahiko was surprised to see no footprints on the tree. Ah. The footprints weren't supposed to be there. So what did that mean? Too much chakra? Yahiko took a stab in the dark. No one answered, of course. He was all by himself now. Sighing, he got back to work, but this time struggling to put less chakra into his feet. At least he managed 10 steps up the tree this time. He wasn't even a quarter of the way up, but still progress is progress. Thanks Nagato, Yahiko thought to himself appreciatively and vowed to repay Nagato later. He still owed Nagato his life for that incident back then, and Yahiko always repaid his debts well, at least he intended to. They stood across from each other in the clearing, 2-leaf shinobi, wearing the common flak jackets that Chunin wear, one blonde and the other a redeed. Neither moved a muscle, both of them awaited the other to make the first move. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. At last, the blonde made his move. His hand moving unbelievably fast, the blonde threw 5 shuriken the redeed's way. The redeed deflected each shuriken fluidly with a kunai and made a dash for the blonde, bearing his kunai threateningly. The blonde leaped back when the redeed got too close. At the last second, he dropped an explosive tag that was set to go off almost instantly. In the 5 seconds between the explosive tag being dropped and going off, the redeed leaped backwards to get out of the blast range. He made it out just barely. The redeed wasn't exactly known for his speed, that was more the blonde's forte. Narrowing his purple-ringed eyes, the redeed attempted to throw his kunai through the smoke to hit the blonde. When he heard a clanging sound, that meant one of two things. 1. The blonde was now coming through the smoke at him, or 2. They both just had the same idea of throwing projectiles through the smokescreen. The redeed didn't see anyone come through the smoke, so it was likely the latter. His purple-ringed eyes widened a fraction as a kunai whizzed past his shoulder and missed by nanometers. The redeed instinctively chose to take cover behind a tree and scope out the situation. When 3 more kunai buried deep into a nearby tree, the redeed knew he'd made the correct course of action. Scanning around his immediate area for any sign of the blonde, the redeed slightly relaxed and analyzed the terrain. An idea came to him, an unexpected one. The blonde wouldn't see it coming from him, as the redeed more or less attempted the same tactic each time they sparred. This should throw him for a loop. But that thought in mind, the redeed made his trap and camouflaged it. They agreed to use no ninjutsu or jinjutsu. It was a simple taijutsu spar with the occasional weapon thrown in, alright. A ton of weapons thrown in. That meant the Redeed would need to lure the blonde into the trap. Simple enough, but he had to be careful about it. They were shinobi, after all. Across the battlefield, the blonde was frowning in contemplation. The Redeed was being far too quiet. But if he moved from his position too much, then he could walk right into the Redeed's hands. Best to play it cautiously and let the Redeed make the first move. A few minutes later, he wasn't disappointed when 7 kunai from all directions homed in on him. The blonde held back a laugh as he suspected shadow clones, but the Redeed was far too honorable in their spars, so that was highly unlikely. Whatever the Redeed did to unleash all those kunai at once from all sides, the blonde had to give him props for it. The blonde ducked and rolled away from his position, narrowly avoiding all of the kunai. The blonde rolled his eyes when 10 more kunai came from out of nowhere and homed in on the spot that he just rolled to. At Nagato always thinking ahead, but this still wasn't anything special. It was still so similar to their past spars. After landing in 3 more hotspots, the blonde began to sweat a little when kunai with explosive tags were thrown into the mix. His lips curved into a nervous grin as he attempted to make conversation with the Redeed, Nagato. Wherever he was. I see Kushina has been influencing your weapon choice again. Try not to blow me to smithereens, for both our sakes. The blonde heard Nagato snort and quietly chuckle, but he couldn't pinpoint his exact location. At least it gave him a general one. As he unknowingly got closer and closer to Nagato, the more kunai attached with explosive notes there were. It was getting hard to get out of each of the blast ranges. To borrow a phrase from a revered lazy clan, the whole thing was troublesome. At last, the blonde spotted Nagato on a tree branch. Nagato had his back turned to him and he seemed to be looking furtively for the blonde. The blonde smirked and silently creeped up on him. Just as he made the last leap to the tree branch that Nagato was on, Nagato pulled a dirty one on him and casually tossed an explosive note behind him, forcing the blonde to cover his face with his arms as he couldn't evade the blast this time. The explosion sent the blonde flying back to the ground and after some tumbling, the blonde managed to screech to a halt and steady himself. Shaken, but not stirred, the blonde muttered. Instinct kicked in and the blonde managed to evade the next explosive note thrown his way. Almost got me that time, Nagato. Nagato frowned thoughtfully at his sparring partner from the tree branch that he was comfortably sitting on. Are you sure, Minato? And that's when the trap was sprung. The blonde, Minato, suddenly found himself entangled in a net that was unleashed from directly beneath him. Not only that, but numerous explosive tags surrounded him. Minato rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. The notes appeared different from regular explosive notes and he did not want to find out how powerful were. Okay, you got me. Minato laughed lightheartedly and Nagato assisted in getting him out of the net. Then Nagato gave him a hand to help him to his feet, which Minato took. Not my usual style, Nagato grinned sheepishly, but I was willing to try something new, especially against you. Minato shook his head and smiled good-naturedly. Don't worry about it. As shinobi, battling with honor isn't a necessity and is rarely used by us, actually. All the same, I really should have surveyed the terrain more. I let this be a lesson. By the way, how did you get all those kunai set up so fast? You bend the rules a little. Nagato laughed. Not really. Kushina showed me that trick. She encouraged me to throw in as many explosives as possible, go nuts. Were her words, I think. But I'm not as explosive happy as Kushina is. I can't say violent or she'd find out somehow and then I'd be in for another personal lesson. Minato gave his brother in arms a sympathetic smile. Kushina wasn't known as the red-hot habanero for just her hair, after all. Men had been reduced to a bloody pulp for less. Well, thank goodness it doesn't run in the family, eh? It has been 5 years since the orphans from the Rain Village claimed the Leaf Village as their new home and they have acclimatized well, both to the environment and to the people. The 3 orphans have reluctantly moved out of Jiraiya's shabby apartment and have been sharing another apartment together. Well, at first, anyway. Thanks to a very gracious gesture from the Hokage, a new clan compound was set up. The Uzumaki compound. It wasn't big and spacious like the Uchiha or Hyuga compounds, but it was enough for the 2 remaining Uzumaki. The Hokage wasn't about to abandon the last surviving members of some of the Leaf's greatest allies, and Nagato and Kushina were thankful for the gesture, as they had no intention of allowing their family to die out. As always, Danzo attempted to use the situation to his advantage, but Hiruzen didn't leave any loopholes for his old friend to exploit, and so Danzo very reluctantly left Nagato and Kushina alone, but that didn't mean he would stay idle when children and grandchildren came along. The clan's longevity and expertise in seals was not to be wasted. Who would miss 1 or 2 Uzumaki children somewhere down the line, anyway? And so, Danzo would wait until a later date to attempt anything on the Uzumaki clan. As a result of living in the same compound with Kushina, not to mention being like a cousin or something, Nagato befriended her and Minato Namikaze by proxy. The bond that they had was tight and they would always be thankful to Jiraiya for that bond. In a way, Nagato saw Kushina and Minato as siblings, and not just because of Jiraiya-sensei. In only 5 years, Nagato had cemented his ties with Minato and Kushina. Both on the battlefield and at home in the Leaf. They couldn't do much in the Second Great Ninja War because of being genin at the time, and because of the fact that the war was wrapping up just as they became genin, but they still saw some battles. They watched each other's backs and trained together frequently. And now their bond could only strengthen. Also by proxy, Konan and Yahiko befriended Minato and Kushina, but perhaps not to the extent of Nagato's friendship with the two lovebirds. The orphans would always tease the two about that. Aside from Minato and Kushina, it was typical now for Nagato to hang around with the Aburam clan, too, and talk about all sorts of things, from current news to philosophy. Yahiko and Konan trained together the most, but there were others that they bonded with. Yahiko got along well with the Inyazuka clan and, surprisingly, the Hyuga clan. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone suspected it was because of Yahiko that the Hyuga were more open and less stiff, or, in more vulgar terms, having the sticks less stuck up their butts. Yahiko would deny this, naturally, and would say the Hyuga clan had always been friendly. Suffice to say, no one bought it. As for the Inyazuka clan, well, they were a little on guard at first, but Yahiko has earned an honorary position in that clan since moving to the Leaf. Konan bonded the most with the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akimichi clans, if only because she couldn't befriend one clan without getting to know the other two. Konan especially liked the Yamanaka clan for their specialties in caring for flora, but that didn't mean that she liked the Akimichi or Nara clans any less. Thanks to the Nara clan, Konan was adequate at shogi, and thanks to the Akimichi clan, she and Yahiko and Nagato were able to eat anywhere. Restaurants were reluctant to serve suspicious outsiders at first, but thanks to the Akimichi vouching for them, that suspicion was lifted for the most part. Tsukumo Haddock was another person that had come to bond with the orphans from Rain. Growing up as an orphan himself, Tsukumo could identify with the orphans from Rain, and he greatly respected the way they endured the trials they went through at such a young age. Tsukumo's son, Kakashi, was a bit too focused on his academics, but after graduating, he'd come around. Yahiko was a huge fan of the man once he had learned of Tsukumo's exploits. Nagato and Konan came to respect him as well, but perhaps not to the extent of Yahiko. The trio from Rain had yet to battle alongside Tsukumo, but they believed every story about Tsukumo and how he seemed to dwarf the Sannin, who were relatively new and gaining a reputation. Tsukumo's wife had passed away that year, and so the three orphans spent as much time with the man and his son as possible when they weren't spending time with the major clans. Yet that didn't stop the three orphans from being friendly to everybody, it just meant that was who they spent the most time with. Not everybody was buddy-buddy with the three of them. No, a number of villagers still had reservations about the outsiders joining their village, and among them and at the forefront was the Uchiha clan. Oh, the Uchiha were cordial enough, but they were far from friendly. They were coldly polite and would go out of their way to avoid contact with the orphans as much as possible. Danzo was someone else that opposed the three orphans being there, but the Warhawk was overly cautious of everyone and everything, and the three orphans presented a potential threat to the Leaf Village in his eyes, especially Nagato and his Rinnegan. Fortunately, Hiruzen encountered every attempt that was made to evict the three from the village, and the council slowly started to side with Hiruzen on the recurring issue, especially with the help of most of the major clan heads. In essence, the three orphans from Rain weren't accepted universally, but they had many supporters to keep them happily in the Leaf Village. Yahiko had even formed a new branch of the Leaf's military that was dedicated to helping out other lands without formal requests for assistance. Its name was Akatsuki. Initially, Yahiko wanted the branch to only plan out liberating the Rain Village because dealing with Hanzo would be tricky. Yet with much convincing from Nagato, Konan, Jiraiya and the Hokage, Yahiko relented and expanded the branch's vision and purpose. Akatsuki didn't get too many followers at first, after all, a war was just wrapping up and the Leaf Village needed to tend to its own people first before thinking about helping other hidden villages. But now, 5 years later, Akatsuki was finally getting a huge influx of volunteers. No one wanted to experience another world war, and if helping out other lands managed to even just stall a future war, people were more than willing to give it a shot. Yahiko, naturally, headed Akatsuki, while Nagato and Konan were his consultants when he needed a second opinion. Among its new members were Minato, Kushina, Tsukumo, Jiraiya, when he wasn't busy building up his spy network, volunteers from each of the major clans, even from the Uchiha, and a host of other shinobi that were of varying ranks. If one was a member of Akatsuki, they still fought and died for the Leaf Village. Nothing changed there. But when one found himself or herself free, one could volunteer to head out with a contingent and help neighboring lands that didn't approach them personally, whether it just be delivering rations or defending them from enemy nin. It was all completely voluntary and was not compulsory, which is why the group had an influx of new membership. One worked his or her own hours and it was for a good cause. Was it a walk in the park all the time? No, but that didn't stop them from offering assistance whenever and wherever possible. Not all hidden villages were so trusting of the help that the leaf offered, but those that did receive assistance were grateful, and some promised to return the favor someday. Overall, Yahiko, Nagato, and Conan were content with how things had progressed in 5 years. They had adjusted to life in the leaf, made new bonds, and were given the go-ahead to establish Akatsuki, which was now flourishing and performing superbly. So when's the next gathering, Nagato? I imagine there's going to be a ceremony for the induction of all the new members that joined the ranks this week. Nagato grinned. 20 new members joined just this week, bringing up Akatsuki's number to an even 100 members. It had become a bit of a headache for Yahiko, having to manage so many members, but he was satisfied with so many taking charge and standing up. Nagato and Conan were, too, that went without saying. I think Yahiko wanted to call an assembly tomorrow. Though that one is more about progress reports and debriefings of new missions, and not inductions. The new members will hit the ground running, pretty much. Minato understood perfectly. Inductions were done when possible, but couldn't always be performed. Inductions allowed new members to learn the ropes and get to know fellow members. They could do so while out on missions though, so inductions were merely a formality. Ah. Well, I wish you guys luck then. I've got to head out on a B rank tomorrow, sorry I'll miss another meeting. Nagato frowned thoughtfully. It's not your fault. Missions are just as important as debriefings, if not more so. You won't be the only one unable to make it, so don't get stressed over it. We'll keep you up to date. So what does the mission entail? Minato rubbed the back of his head and grinned. Lord Hokage wants me to infiltrate a suspected hidden stone outpost. It might be nothing at all. Better safe than sorry, though. The Hidden Stone Village wasn't exactly happy with the outcome of the last Great War, relations with them have worsened severely. If this outpost, which is militarizing very quietly, is one of theirs, then they could be gearing up for another war. But it's also possible that the outpost doesn't belong to any of the great nations, and that's why Lord Hokage is treating this as reconnaissance, and not seek and destroy. It won't be my first B rank, but it'll be tougher than anything I've handled up until now. Nagato nodded in silent agreement. They had only been Chunin for 2 months now, all of them. Minato, Kushina, Nagato, Yahiko, and Conan. Minato was the only one to have handled a B rank in those 2 months, and that mission had barely made the cut. Minato's current mission was a solid B rank, potentially dealing with a fierce rival of the Leaf Village. But you at least have backup in case of the worst case scenario. Nagato didn't doubt Minato's abilities, both of them were heralded as prodigies. But even prodigies could not be prepared for everything. Minato nodded affirmatively. Yeah, but I'll be the only one actually enter the encampment. At least Hisashi and Hiashi won't be too far away. I'm still surprised Lord Hokage okayed sending the twins out together, though I shouldn't be. The two work well together. I know I can count on them. Looking up at the sun, Minato's lips quirked upwardly. Well, it's about time for me to meet up with Kushina. If I'm late for another date, I don't want to imagine what Kushina will do to me. Nagato laughed softly. After Minato said this, they began leaving the training ground together. Silence descended on them, and the two just enjoyed the sereneness of it all. It was just so peaceful. So anything new going on with you, Nagato? Minato casually asked. Nagato rubbed his chin as they kept trotting along. I'm still discovering new abilities with my Rinnegan. As you know, they give me the ability to use all 5 chakra natures, repel and attract objects and people, and absorb chakra and attacks, but most recently I have discovered that I can summon more than one type of animal. So far I have summoned a 3-headed dog, a bird, and some kind of insect. I assume I can summon more, but I haven't attempted to summon anything else yet. Sensei and I are at a loss as to how this is possible, but he speculates that there is still more that I can do with my powerful Dojutsu. Since the last one to possess the Rinnegan was the Sage of 6 Paths himself, I have no one to turn to for guidance in regards to learning all the secrets of these eyes. Minato placed a comforting hand on Nagato's shoulder as they stood still now. It'll be alright, Nagato. I don't know if you'll be able to find out all the powers you possess within your lifetime, but I do know that I'll be there with you every step of the way. Kushina, too. And Jiraiya-sensei. Nagato gave a small smile. Thanks. Jiraiya-sensei said more or less the same thing. I wish there was someone to turn to for guidance, but I'm satisfied with the life I do have and wouldn't give it up even if I got the chance to learn under the sage himself. With that, the two resumed their walk back into the village Nara clan main house. Meanwhile, at the Nara clan's main house, 4 people were gathered around a shogi board. A blue-haired young woman and a raven-haired young man sat cross-legged across from each other, while 2 other young men stood on either side of the raven-haired man. The raven-haired man was a Nara. He had 2 scars on the right side of his face and a goatee, had his hair tied up in a spiky ponytail, and had pierced ears. He wore a flak jacket with a meshed shirt underneath and a deerskin coat over the flak jacket and wore hand guards. To the Nara's left, a long-haired blonde with spikes at the top of his hair stood with arms crossed. He had blue-green eyes, wore his headband for the leaf, and the standard flak jacket over a black outfit with a sleeveless red haori over all that, and had handguards like the Nara. The man was a Yamanaka. And standing to the Nara's right was a long, spiky, red-haired young man who had purple marks on his cheeks and wore a black suit and armor with a kanji for food on it with a white rope belt, and he wore a cloth headband over his head instead of a forehead protector, but like the Yamanaka and Nara, he had handguards, too. The Nara, Yamanaka, and Akimichi were all recently made clan heads. Finally, the blue-haired woman, Konan, had amber eyes, orange nail polish, lavender markings around the eyes, and an origami flower that was still present in her hair. She wore a light blue skirt that went to her knees, white stockings, and a grey karate top that was similar to the one that she wore when training under Jiraiya back in Rain. She lacked her flak jacket at this time, but she didn't make a habit of wearing it all the time. She did, however, proudly wear her leaf headband. And while Konan was not a clan head, being one of 2 advisors to the head of the Akatsuki branch of the Leaf Shinobi forces was pretty prestigious in its own right. Like the Anbu, the police force, and the T&I department, Akatsuki had its own duties to fulfill, even if it relied on volunteers unlike the other branches. "Well? You going to make a move, Shikaku?" the Yamanaka wryly asked his friend. The game had gone unchanged for the past hour because Shikaku had been intensely analyzing the board. Shikaku was a genius and could come up with strategies faster than anyone else. And yet, this time, I think he's coming to grips with the fact that he can't win this game, the Akimichi teased. Shikaku narrowed his eyes. It was true, no matter what move he made, the game was going to end in impasse. Or his loss, if he made a sloppy move. However, Shikaku Nara never made a sloppy move. For the past hour, he had been running over all the possibilities in his head, even going so far as to think up to 20 moves into the future, with each possible move that he could make, and then rechecking those possibilities meticulously. Suffice to say, Shikaku was not satisfied with his options. He hated to admit it, but Joza was right. A victory was highly unlikely now. However, this only seemed to amuse him, now that he thought about it some more. "You've improved, Konan. Well done." Shikaku smirked, finally deigning to make a move. One did not simply win against Shikaku Nara and Shogi. Even reaching impasse or repetition with him was unheard of. Well, it wasn't impossible, just very rare. This game was a testament to Konan's vast improvement in strategy. In fact, if Shikaku wasn't courting Yoshino, he'd probably try his luck with Konan. All women were troublesome, but at least Konan had a sharp mind, which Shikaku admired. Konan beamed at her opponent. "Thank you, Shikaku. You're a challenge, as always." From there, the game went along silently. Choza and the Yamanaka and Noichi watched in reverent awe as the game ended in impasse. This was the first time that Konan had managed to reach this outcome with Shikaku, having lost all previous games due to being a beginner in shogi, and Shikaku being Shikaku. Shogi master and tactical genius. If another war came up, Shikaku would make a name for himself, that much Konan was sure of. Shikaku cracked his neck. Games with Konan took a while, even though he won every game but this one. "Up for another round?" Shikaku asked the brunette. Konan shook her head, standing up and stretching. "I'd love to, but I promised to meet Nagato later," she replied. "Next time." Shikaku lazily smirked. "Next time, then." Toza uncrossed his arms while Shikaku slowly got to his feet. "Do you have time for a quick bite? It's around lunchtime." Konan shrugged nonchalantly. "Sure, I've got a little time." "Yakiniku's again?" Toza rumbled with laughter. "Is there anywhere better?" No more than 10 minutes later, and they were seated in Yakiniku BBQ and waiting for their orders. "So, Konan, how are Nagato and Yahiko?" "We haven't seen them for a while," Inoichi remarked. He was sitting next to Konan while Choza and Shikaku sat across from them. Konan smiled slightly, idly creating an origami piece out of one of the napkins. "Nagato's about the same, I suppose. I don't see him around as much outside of Akatsuki meetings because of his training, and that's why we're spending the day together. As for Yahiko, the stress of leading Akatsuki is settling in. On top of that, Yahiko is performing missions left and right to stay sharp and gain income. We're easily affording our monthly rent and we're not going to starve anytime soon, but he stresses about that, too. I think he should take a vacation to take his mind off things, but he feels he can't do that." Their food came, and Shikaku looked Konan right in the eye. "What about you, Konan? How are you holding up?" Konan filled her plate with barbecue and then returned Shikaku's calculating stare. "I'm fine, Shikaku. I've had to take up more missions so that Yahiko isn't so stressed, but I'm no worse for the wear. Lord Hokage believes I'd be a good candidate for Jonin within a year. Well, all 3 of us, to be honest. Nagato might get the promotion even sooner as he has the skill repertoire for it already, and Yahiko is definitely gaining leadership experience through Akatsuki." Shikaku raised an eyebrow at Konan. "And? What about you?" Konan closed her eyes. I just need the experience, I'm not too worried. I am ready for higher ranked missions, however. Once Tsunade-sensei understood how skilled we were, we stopped taking D ranks almost immediately. I've had nothing but C ranks for almost 5 years. Inoichi turned to face Konan. I heard about that. Any idea why Lord Hokage wouldn't let you take anything higher? Konan chewed bits of meat and drank some water before answering. Our situation has been complicated. It mostly has to do with the council. Now that we're Chunin, however, the council has no right to deny us higher ranked missions. For me, I wanted to wait a little longer before taking up B ranks, but now I feel I'm more than ready. Yahiko has been tied up with Akatsuki, and Nagato seems to share my mindset of waiting before accepting higher ranked missions. Nagato is in no rush. Shikaku and Inoichi nodded thoughtfully, and then there was a period of silence as the four ate their meal. Choza looked over to Konan and swallowed some barbec before speaking. Are you still interested in becoming an academy instructor? I've applied for the position, but again, the council is fighting tooth and nail every step of the way, Konan replied. They're afraid I'll sabotage the curriculum, or worse, turn future shinobi against the leaf. Shikaku rolled his eyes. The council's a pain, but at least Lord Hokage has a final say in everything, he drawled. Yeah, they're not all powerful, Choza affirmed. They have a purpose, but they tend to get on everyone's nerves. Sorry they give you guys the third degree so often, Konan shrugged uncaringly. They're fiercely loyal to the village, to a fault even. I can appreciate their cautious nature, though I do resent them for giving Yahiko and Nagato such a hard time. Inoichi gave her a meaningful look. Just continue to prove them wrong. You have Lord Hokage's approval, and everyone's coming around, slowly. You have the unswerving support of the Ino-Shikacho clans. Konan beamed appreciatively. Thank you for all you've done. Hokage Administration Building, Akatsuki's main office. Yahiko ran his hands through his hair and tiredly rubbed his eyes. He appreciated the Hokage granting him an office in the administration building and that he even approved Akatsuki's conception. But paperwork was the bane of everyone's existence. Funny how shinobi would volunteer to deliver rations to other villages, but not a single one would volunteer to do the tedious paperwork. Yahiko desperately wanted a secretary, but since Akatsuki was based on volunteers, the Hokage could not appoint one for him. And while he could easily hire one, Yahiko simply didn't have that kind of money. Unlike Nagato, Yahiko did not know the shadow clone technique, and regular clones would be of no help here. Even Nagato and Konan said they wouldn't do it unless they were paid for it, bastards. Yahiko groaned. Who was he kidding? Who in their right mind would want to do the paperwork? Applications, personnel records, reports on missions and current events, somebody had to sort through it and organize it all. And unfortunately, because no one else was stepping up, that meant Yahiko had to do it. On top of this, Yahiko still had to do his duty for the village, appear at all Akatsuki gatherings, and be available when members wanted to meet with him. It's a wonder I have any social life at all, Yahiko bitterly thought. He'd never take secretaries for granted again. At least Konan was picking up the slack for him, with the addition of 20 new members, the paperwork had increased marginally. The more paperwork there was, the more time that Yahiko needed to sacrifice. And there was no way he was going to let it stack up, it'd never get done that way. Perhaps it was time to take it up a notch and take a few B ranks. They'd be more taxing, of course, but there would be more reward, and if he saved up enough. I'm coming in, Yahiko. Yahiko braced himself. His office was not all that big, and the door slamming open would be enough to topple over the towering piles of doom. Yahiko wasn't disappointed when the door swung into the wall and the moving air knocked over all of his hard work. Darn it, Yahiko grumbled. I was making progress, too. In the doorway, a young woman with dark brown, spiky, unkempt hair stood with hands on her hips. She wore the traditional Chunin outfit, complete with black pants and shirt and a Chunin flak jacket, and she had an animalistic appearance about her, with vertical slit-like pupils, canine-like fangs and claws, and her clan's fang markings on her cheeks. Tsume smirked mischievously. You've been cooped up in here for too long, Yahiko. I was waiting for you to go on your lunch break, but it seems you're skipping those now, too. No one should have to sit behind a desk for so long. But Yahiko was grasping at straws now. Tsume had a point, and yet what about the paperwork? Tsume barked a laugh. We'll get someone to cover for you. I don't have that kind of money. The Carrot Top argued. Tsume stepped out of the room, and a few minutes later, Yahiko could hear his sensei complaining to Tsume. Tsume dragged the toad sage by the ear into Yahiko's office soon after. I just got done with reporting to Sarutobi-sensei. Jiraiya whined, massaging his throbbing ear. Tsume motioned to Yahiko, who still looked utterly shocked at Jiraiya's being there. Do favor for your pup, eh? He needs a break, and you don't seem to be too busy. Jiraiya crossed his arms and sternly looked at the mess of paperwork sprawled all over the desk and floor. Will I at least get paid for it? Tsume heartily slapped him in the back. You'll be doing it free of charge, of course. Out of the goodness of your heart. We won't be more than an hour. Jiraiya twitched. You owe me for this. Yahiko visibly relaxed and got up. Thank you, sensei, I'll try and reimburse you at a later date. Tsume took Yahiko by the hand and left without another word. Jiraiya continued staring after they were long gone. Out of the goodness of his heart, sighing irritably, Jiraiya began picking up the paperwork. More than 3 hours later, Yahiko still hadn't returned. Streets of the Leaf Village. I don't think I can thank you enough, Tsume. Paperwork is probably the hardest part of the job. The recently made clan head of the Inyazuka clan waved her hand dismissively as she walked alongside Yahiko. It was nothing. Had to get back at that old perv somehow. So, where you wanna go? Yahiko grinned lopsidedly. The usual. Sushi seems good about now. I do wanna invite Hiashi and Hisashi first, though. Tsume put on a playful pout. Aw, when here I was thinking we could call it a date. She cackled when that garnered a small twitch from Yahiko. Nah, I was thinking of bringing along Shibi for company, too. Always a blast getting him to come out of his shell. Yahiko blinked once. Twice. Thrice. Refresh my memory, who is Shibi again? And suddenly Yahiko and Tsume were joined in their trot to the Hyuga household by a young man with a high-collared beige jacket. The man had short, spiky black hair and wore dark sunglasses that obscured his eyes. Beyond the gourd strapped to his back, there really wasn't anything that made the young man distinguishable. He seemed plain. It is good to meet you again, Yahiko. I hope you haven't forgotten me again. The man greeted Yahiko smoothly and succinctly. Yahiko paled slightly and shook his head rapidly. Of course I remember you, Shibi. You're very memorable. HN. Shibi wasn't convinced in the least. Tsume stared at Shibi dully. You know, if you want others to remember you, you gotta get out more, Shibi. And speak up, don't hang in the background all the time. Honestly. Shibi made no physical response, his hands remained in his pockets. Yet if one listened closely, they could hear his parasitic insects buzzing agitatedly. In any event, comrades do not forget one another. Friends should especially take care to remember who their friends are. Yahiko sweat dropped. I said I was sorry, what more do you want from me? Silence. Tsume sighed in irritation. Shibi was so sensitive about friendship that it wasn't even funny. She hoped his future kids would be made out of tougher stuff, but suspected they would be like mini Shibas. Alright, you've made your point, Shibi. Just let bygones be bygones and move on. Shibi sighed quietly. Nagato and Conan do not forget me. Well, Nagato hangs around you a lot and Conan's too polite to forget anyone in me. Well, I'm still memorizing the names and faces of all Akatsuki members, Yahiko groused. Shaking his head, he grinned at thinking about his friends. That is still no excuse. I know every single one of my comrades. Shibi argued. Tsume sighed. Not everyone has parasitic insects that help in identifying people, Shibi. Tsume deadpanned. And just like that, the argument was dropped. When they reached the Hyuga compound, Hiashi and Hisashi were already on their way out together. And both wore similar forehead protectors and even similar robes. Ever since Yahiko came to the village, the Hyuga twins had become more eccentric. They dressed the way they did not to appear regal, but to mess with everyone's heads. People would be so confused that they wouldn't know which twin was which. I see we'll be going out for another luncheon together, one Hyuga twin coolly noted. Alright, which one are you? Tsume dryly asked. They even had similar smells, so the young Inyazuka couldn't tell them apart. Yahiko chuckled. Can't you tell? That's Hisashi pretending to be Hiashi again. The twin that hadn't spoken yet narrowed his eyes at Yahiko. No, I'm Hisashi. And if someone they knew ever figured out which was which, they would firmly deny it until they couldn't. It was their way of loosening up. Yahiko had convinced them they were too stiff and steeped in Hyuga tradition. Hiashi was arrogant due to being a main house member, and Hisashi had been surly towards Hiashi because of that and his branch house status. And so the two had reconciled and decided to rebel against tradition as much as possible, going so far as to act like common folk and have fun with their lives. Not excessively, of course, they still had serious moments and trained diligently. But it was fun to mess with people all the same. Yahiko smirked. Hisashi, he pointed to the young man on the right. And then he pointed to the one on the left, saying, Hiashi. I've got a way of telling the two apart. The first Hyuga twin that had spoken up narrowed his eyes, too. How? Yahiko laughed at their naivety. Well, if you don't know Hisashi, I can't tell you. There'd be no fun in that. Yahiko's secret way of telling them apart lied in looking for the tiniest differences between the two Hyugas. Hiashi always had some hair partially covering his ears, while Hisashi had all of it tucked behind his ears. They also had a slightly different style of walking. Hiashi tended to start on his right foot and Hisashi his left. The tiniest telltale signs. Yahiko just knew what to look for because of spending so much time with the twins. But he wasn't about to tell the Hyugas that. They'd try to correct their unconscious habits and that'd make it harder to tell them apart. At last the Hyuga twins acquiesced. They knew better than to doubt Yahiko when it came to telling them apart. The leader of Akatsuki was always spot on. "So the usual place?" Hiashi inquired while they walked. Ihiko grinned widely. "Naturally. Sushi's good all the time. I'd say it's the best food in the world, but that goes without saying." At a ramen stand elsewhere in the village, a certain retarded Kunoichi sat up rigidly and punched her palm determinedly. "Someone is going to need another lesson about the food of the gods that is ramen, you know." Minato sweat dropped to Kushina's outburst. He knew not to say anything out loud because Kushina had a sixth sense for these things. If someone was badmouthing ramen or claiming some other food to be better, then someone was going to get hurt later. They just didn't know yet. Probably. Back with Yahiko, Tsume, Shibi, Hiashi and his Ashi, Yahiko shuddered as a sense of foreboding hit him. For the record, you guys did not hear me say that out loud. I'd like to not be beaten to a bloody pulp." Yahiko's friends winced sympathetically for him. For his sake they'd keep quiet, but Kushina always just knew who needed a thrashing. Every single time. Unfortunately, today proved to be no different. After a relaxing luncheon with some of his best friends, Yahiko had been on his way back to the office when Kushina found him and wailed on him. He'd spent the rest of the afternoon in a hospital bed with one Kushina Uzumaki haunting his bedside. Next time, Yahiko would just keep his humble opinion to himself. It'd be much less painful that way. At a tea house, after the brief lunch with Shikaku, Inoichi and Choza, Konan met up with Nagato at a quaint tea house that they both frequented. There was nothing extraordinary about the tea the place served, but it was an excellent place to relax and unwind. In addition, the owner of the establishment had been one of the few to actually accept their business without the Akamichi clan's insistence. Placing their orders, Konan went with an herbal tea and Nagato green tea. Nagato and Konan got comfortable while they waited. "I hear you've been improving in shogi." Nagato broke the tentative silence amiably, leaning back casually in his seat. Konan beamed. "I actually didn't lose today's game with Shikaku. It wasn't a win officially, but reaching impasse with that man is a feat in itself." Nagato grinned a little at that. Konan had to be improving drastically if she reached that outcome with Shikaku. "I'm happy for you. Speaking for myself, I've recently discovered that I can summon more than one type of creature. Jiraiya-sensei doesn't want me talking about it yet, but the creatures appear to all have Rinnegan eyes as well. It's weird, but I swear I can see through their eyes in addition to my normal vision. If I am visually linked with my summons, then that will be a very handy ability to have out in the field." Konan nodded understandingly. "It would be handy. Sneak attacks from enemy nin would all fall flat if Nagato could cover all his blind spots. I'm glad Jiraiya-sensei is helping you when he can. After all the changes we've been through in 5 years, it feels good to have one constant with sensei around. Don't get me wrong, I couldn't be happier that we came here. I suppose I'm just a little homesick is all." Nagato frowned thoughtfully. "That's nothing to be ashamed of. Part of me misses Rain Country as well, but I'm of the opinion that our home is with Jiraiya-sensei. He made our days in Rain more bearable than when we were stealing just to survive, and he taught us how to defend ourselves. We followed him here and made new bonds. I can't imagine life without Minato, Kushina, or Shibi now." Konan hummed thoughtfully. Nagato was right, of course. She couldn't imagine life without any of their acquaintances in the Leaf. True, they could have built up Akatsuki and Rain and liberated it, but they wouldn't have had the support of the Leaf, and Konan had to wonder if they'd be as strong as they were now if they had stayed in their home country. A few moments later their tea arrived and the two sipped in tranquil silence. "Will you be taking on a B rank anytime soon?" Nagato Konan casually asked. This was often on her mind as well. Nagato shrugged. "Perhaps. I have to test my abilities in the field at some point. Jiraiya-sensei is helping me out as much as possible and I wish to do him and the village proud. Of course I do wish there was a way to minimize the bloodshed, but the road to peace is not an easy one. Not everyone strives for peace like we do." Konan was aware that Nagato was referring to the Hidden Cloud and Stone villages in particular, but his words also covered those that sought peace in different ways. In other words, Nagato was also referring to people like Danzo, who would sooner conquer the rest of the nations and place them under the Leaf's iron fist. Jiraiya-sensei, Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato all knew that peace wouldn't be achieved through more bloodshed, but not all people were of the same opinion. "Do you think we're really making a difference?" Konan asked dubiously. Nagato smiled reassuringly. "Slowly, yes. Other lands are not so trusting of us, but trust isn't easily earned, especially after years of constant fighting. We just have to keep trying and never lose hope. There will be future wars no doubt, but we can't let them stop us. Jiraiya-sensei is searching for the answer, and we are too. Together, peace is achievable. There's no doubt in my mind." Returning Nagato's smile, Konan steered the conversation to lighter topics, such as how Kushina and Minato were, how her own training was progressing, and planning to take their first B rank together. The light chatting went well into the evening, and the two orphans from Rain enjoyed each other's company. Back at the Hokage Tower, Jiraiya was still in Yahiko's office sorting through the paperwork. Shadow clones helped, but they, too, abandoned Jiraiya after hours of going through the stuff. Jiraiya had been about to rant to himself about the unjustness of it all again when a certain report caught his eye. So, the third Kazakiage has gone missing, Jiraiya muttered to himself. Storm clouds boomed overhead as rain pitter-pattered on the steel skyscrapers noisily. The hidden rain village, while minor, was sprawled out like a metropolis, and it reeked of oppression. The people ambled about in common, sometimes filthy street rags, and no one especially stood out as unique. Occasionally, one would fearfully look over his shoulder or up at the tallest skyscraper in the village as the rebreather-wearing shinobi of the hidden rain village patrolled the village authoritatively. It made Yahiko's heart ache to see his home village so dismal and full of despair. Has Sensei found a path to the tower yet? Yahiko, in a hushed tone, asked his companion. Nagato shook his head minutely, keeping his eyes toward the tower. Yahiko and Nagato were eating at a dumpling shop near the center of the village that gave Nagato a good view of the tower and the area surrounding it. To blend in, they wore gray cloaks with hoods that covered their heads. Hanzo's grown more paranoid over the years, Yahiko. He's been losing this war steadily and he's not taking any chances whatsoever on the home front. Our intel tells us that Hanzo is guarded 24 hours a day and that body searches are conducted on everyone that approaches him, even children. Ideally, we want there to be as few casualties as possible. It's what makes this final push so hard. Yahiko gnashed his teeth in frustration. I know that it's just Yahiko clenched his fists. To come back here and have to see this. Nagato's mouth turned into a thin line. Nothing more needed to be said, Nagato felt just as strongly. An uneasy silence hung over the duo after that. Nagato finally spoke up after a while. It will recover, Yahiko. I don't know the exact means by which we'll carry out this mission, but we'll work it out. Hanzo is formidable, but he is not invincible. There is still hope. Nagato didn't need to look at his friend to see that his words impacted him. Yahiko managed to relax, if only slightly. DCH look at me, getting bent out of shape for nothing, Yahiko muttered and ran his hand through his spiky locks sheepishly. You know it's bad if you're lecturing me, rings. Nagato gave his friend a sheepish smile, but then turned his attention back to the tower, waiting for the signal. I'm only stating the truth. Conan would say much the same thing if she wasn't with Jiraiya-sensei right now. Yahiko crossed his arms and pouted, but he didn't rebut Nagato's claim. I still find it amazing we got in here at all, what with Jiraiya-sensei's unkempt hair. Blue, orange, and red hair doesn't stick out. Nagato briefly shot his friend a deadpan look, but grinned slightly when Yahiko scowled at the comment. You know what I mean. With all of Hanzo's paranoia, I would have thought he'd have locked down this whole village tightly, no foreigners at all. Nagato shrugged. Hanzo is realistic paranoid, but realistic. Even if he forbade foreigners, shinobi of any metal could still infiltrate and cause problems. No, Hanzo has channeled most of his shinobi resources into defending himself. He doesn't care about defending this village right now, villages can be rebuilt and repopulated, but he views himself as irreplaceable. Yahiko rolled his eyes. And that's why he's making the people obediently follow him. To make them lose their sense of independence and autonomy. To make them codependent. Nagato grinned wryly. Pretty much. Hanzo used to be a man worth respecting, but now he's a mere shadow of his former self. His ultimate goal is to survive this war at all costs, even if that means sacrificing the very people he's a leader of. It's sad, really. Yahiko grumbled and barely held back the urge to stand up and start pacing. What is taking sensei so long? The more I hear you dissect Hanzo from a psychological standpoint, the more I just want to put that guy down. Where's Orochimaru and Shizune? Nagato shook his head. They have their roles to play, too, Yahiko. Once Jiraiya-sensei distracts many of the guards outside, Conan will fly us to the top of the tower, where security will be least tight. Orochimaru will be supporting Jiraiya-sensei, and Shizune will be there to heal them both. We were quite fortunate that Tsunade-sensei allowed her to assist. She cut her ties to the village after the last war, after all. Doing us this favor was extremely gracious of her. Yahiko frowned at the mention of Tsunade. After this war's over, we gotta get her to come back. I mean, she's an awesome medical ninja and all, but I kinda just miss having her around, even if she was harsh in training us. So you do care about her? Nagato teased. Yahiko made a face at that. Shut up, at least I can own up to my feelings, unlike you when it comes to. Nagato cut him off there. It really isn't the time to talk about this. Nagato narrowed an eye at Yahiko out of the corner of his eye. Besides, she's happily with someone, Yahiko scoffed. I'm not so sure anymore that someone has been screwing up with her lately and he can't seem to fix it, no matter how hard he tries, Yahiko grumbled. And don't try to deny it. Nagato gave Yahiko a meaningful stare before turning back to the tower again. In any case, the signal should be given soon. Be ready to move out swiftly, we only get one shot at this. I've been ready since we received this mission. Closer to the tower, Jiraiya sighed as he knocked out yet another lackey that nearly gave away his presence. If I swore to never give up in anything, I'd have aborted this mission a long time ago, there's been way too many close calls. Jiraiya grumbled, standing up straight again. You still okay, Conan? Conan nodded. She was a few feet behind Jiraiya as they began walking towards the tower again. It is a little odd when you think about it, though, Jiraiya-sensei. Slightly turning his head to face Conan, Jiraiya quirked an eyebrow. What is it? Well, we've only run into a handful of shinobi that nearly raised the alarm, correct? We've avoided a number of them, but there should be a lot more than this, shouldn't there? If Hanzo has called back most of his shinobi. Jiraiya understood what she was getting at, but there's probably more inside. But you're right, we shouldn't put our guard down yet. It is a little strange there aren't more out here, but one can't predict a lunatic strategy. Conan directed a deadpan stare at Jiraiya. Hanzo is paranoid, sensei. He's not quite deranged or insane, just overly cautious. We shouldn't take him lightly. Jiraiya resisted the urge to burst out laughing, but still chuckled a bit. I know, Conan, I fought this guy with Tsunade and Orochimaru. I know this guy is strong and that he's being extremely careful, but you gotta admit the guy's lost a few marbles if the guy's abusing his power and subjugating the people he swore to protect as village leader, eh? When Conan's stern face didn't change, Jiraiya slouched in disappointment. Okay, I was just trying to lighten the mood. Sheesh. Only when Jiraiya was properly chastised and had his back turned did Conan crack a small grin. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Wouldn't you say this is close enough, sensei? Jiraiya shrugged. He supposed a little over halfway on the path towards the tower wasn't bad. I wanted to take out a few more enemy meat shields so you wouldn't be so harassed on your way up there, but I guess I can handle things from here. Go and get Nagato and Yahiko. Conan nodded and disappeared as she turned into paper butterflies and flew off to do just that. Jiraiya bit down on his thumb and ran through the appropriate hand seals. Well, there's no turning back now. Hope Orochimaru's ready for this summoning jutsu. A huge cloud of dust was kicked up and when it cleared, a giant magenta-colored toad appeared, bearing a Sasamata and Sakazuki-like shield. The operation has begun, has it? The toad rumbled. Jiraiya noticed the hordes of shinobi flooding to meet him in battle. Ready, Mr. Gamaken, let's mow him down. Gamaken sighed breezily as he swung his Sasamata down in one swing to deal with the first enemies that had reached them. I will try, but I am ungraceful you see. Jiraiya chuckled as he watched at least 5 hidden range shinobi go flying from just that one attack. You'll do just fine. On the other side of the tower, Orochimaru raised an eyebrow as he withdrew a blade from an enemy's stomach. He could faintly hear the cry of many shinobi, and that meant the operation had begun. No turning back. Jiraiya started a little early, Orochimaru murmured, but bit down on his thumb all the same and ran through the same hand seals that Jiraiya had. Shizune, are you ready? Orochimaru had asked while turning his head slightly in Shizune's direction. Shizune leaped to his side and nodded. She didn't exactly like working with a man, he lacked a merciful bone in his body, but Lady Tsunade had requested her to be a part of this mission and Orochimaru had just happened to be her partner. Let's split their attention. Kukuku summoning jutsu. Orochimaru declared and another huge cloud of dust appeared. When it dissipated, he and Shizune were atop of a very large purple snake. A slightly agitated purple snake, but one that looked ready for battle all the same. Over there. Orochimaru could hear voices down on the ground. He had a feral grin on his face as he spied dozens of shinobi charging his way. All of these pawns are yours, Manda. Have at them. Manda growled in reply, but went after the enemy pawns with gusto, devouring several at once and constantly moving about to confuse the enemy and simultaneously attack. While some lucky shinobi managed to get atop of Manda, Orochimaru dealt with them personally, mortally wounding a number of them with a blade. The majority were either slammed into Manda's body or simply crushed by the gargantuan snake. Needless to say, Shizune shivered at the brutality of it all and loathed how Orochimaru seemed to be relishing it. At the age of 15, Shizune knew that death was par the course in the life of a shinobi, but that didn't mean she had to savor it, which Orochimaru seemed to be doing. Shizune was shaken out of her thoughts by 2 shinobi that had managed to make it up to her. Drawing out her poison-laced senbon, 5 in each hand, Shizune flicked them precisely at vital spots on the enemy's bodies. Without further fanfare, the 2 unknown assailants fell to their deaths. As soon after Shizune had knocked them off, Manda had abruptly changed course and slithered right over them, crushing them completely. Shizune winced and remained silent. She absolutely had to remain calm and collected so that she could fulfill her duties as medic nin, after all. In the air above the hidden rain village, Conan had sprouted paper wings and had taken to the air with Nagato and Yahiko, one attached to each of her arms. Down below, the 3 could see that Jiraiya had now summoned Gamabunta as well, and Orochimaru and Shizune were on Manda, and that the battles were surprisingly overwhelmingly in the 2 Sanin's favor. It was suspect, and Conan didn't like it at all. Noticing Conan's troubled expression, Yahiko casually remarked, everything will be fine, Conan. Jiraiya-sensei's too strong to die by the likes of them. Yahiko said this with a smirk on his face. Conan narrowed her eyes down at Yahiko. I wonder if you would be okay if I accidentally dropped you, Conan said a bit frostily. Yahiko rubbed the back of his head with his free hand. Come on, Conan, I know I'm not your most favorite person in the world right now, but you're not that cold. All I'm saying is have a little bit of faith in Jiraiya-sensei. Conan looked to the side slightly, away from Yahiko's gaze. It's not that I doubt his abilities, Yahiko, everyone has their limits, and that includes Jiraiya-sensei. If you'll recall, even the third Raikage was purported to have died by overwhelming odds, and according to Lord Third, that man was inhumanely strong. Yahiko shrugged at that. Yeah, but limits are meant to be surpassed. We're shinobi, we endure. Turning to face Nagato, Yahiko then said, you remember the plan, right, Rings? Nagato furrowed his brow as he remembered the mission briefing. Sensei, this plan is insane. Even by my standards. Jiraiya's voice boomed in opposition to the battle plan put forth by Conan. Hype ever present in his mouth, Hiruzen Sarutobi leaned back in his chair and fixed all of them with a stern stare. Jiraiya does have a point, Conan Hiruzen said, first addressing the main strategist of the orphans from the Hidden Rain village. Hanzo of the Salamander is not to be taken lightly. If Jiraiya, Orochimaru and Tsunade could not take the man down, what makes you think that you, Yahiko, and Nagato could? The man may have deteriorated slightly mentally, but that is just speculation. In addition, why should I only send the 5 of you, in addition to Tsunade, should she accept your request? Conan closed her eyes contemplatively, but then opened them again a few moments later, looking Sarutobi in the eye. Lord Third, I understand your concern. But Nagato, Yahiko, and I must be the ones to take Hanzo down. Nagato has the Rinnegan, Hanzo is not aware of that. Nagato has become quite adept in using his Dojutsu, and I am certain that he could take down Hanzo. Yahiko and I will serve as distractions so that Nagato may go in for the killing blow. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. And what of the Sannin? What will they be doing? Jiraiya-sensei, Orochimaru and Tsunade-sensei, should she accept our request, will serve as distractions for Hanzo's forces. We need a massive diversion, and who better than the Sannin? Once we take out Hanzo, we will not need to continue to fend off the Hidden Rain village in this war. We have them on the run, but for how long will that last? Hiruzen simply shook his head. I still do not see why I cannot send a larger invasion force with you. I will say it again. Hanzo of the Salamander is not to be underestimated. Your strategy rests solely on the element of surprise, and there is never any guarantee that you will have that. Pausing, Hiruzen exhaled. Allow me to play devil's advocate. Say that your strategy works. You reach Hanzo, but he overwhelms you, and you are brutally, even fatally, wounded. Tsunade has her hands full fighting the army of Hanzo, and no one else can help you. What will you do then? Conan acknowledged the scenario with a nod. I have taken that into account, Lord Hokage. Tsunade-sensei would largely be playing a supportive role. As medic nin, it would be her job to leave much of the fighting to Orochimaru and Jiraiya-sensei. They have summoning contracts with the toads and snakes, and both are combat-oriented summons. Once inside the village, and the first toads and snakes are summoned, the Hidden Rain shinobi will be drawn to defend themselves against the summons, and will miss us as I fly me, Yahiko, and Nagato to our destination. Many of the Hidden Rain shinobi should be dealt with by the summons, and Jiraiya-sensei and Orochimaru would not have to step into battle until the summons are dispelled. If they need to, the Sannin can even retreat if they happen to lose the battle of attrition. By that point, Hanzo should be dealt with by us. Nagato is the key to our victory. If we bring a large invasion force, Hanzo will see us coming and will have time to prepare countermeasures. If it is just the 6 of us, Hanzo should not see us coming and we should catch him off guard. Hiruzen laced his fingers together and appeared contemplative of Conan's logic. Jiraiya began to sputter. Sensei. You're not seriously considering this they made Jonin 2 years ago. Please give me some more time to at least train Nagato. Hiruzen did not deign to reply to Jiraiya. Hiko shook his head and chuckled. I still can't believe the Hokage gave us the go-ahead with this. Conan made it sound like it would work, don't get me wrong, but the future of this village now rests on our shoulders. Thanks for the pressure, Conan. Hiko cheekily gave Conan a toothy grin. Conan narrowed her eyes at him again, and that got him to drop the grin for now. Nagato continued to silently ruminate. Conan said it herself that he was the key player in this final assault, but that didn't mean he didn't have doubts. Seeing this, Yahiko playfully kicked at his redeeted friend. Aw, come on, Rings. Don't tell me you're still scared. We've been preparing for this, and you've got, like 5 different powers thanks to the Rinnegan, right? Summoning, absorption, gravitational power, some weird machine-like power, and the ability to control all 5 chakra natures, right? You'll destroy Hanzo. Nagato med, but didn't look up at Yahiko. Asura, Preta, Animal, and Diva, those are the 4 paths I've discovered, yes. Sensei and I are pretty sure that wielding all 5 chakra natures isn't a path. And I'm almost certain there are other paths that have yet to be discovered, and other powers, too. Well, what's the problem? Yahiko asked curiously. Nagato's mouth turned into a thin line. Hanzo as well, he was able to beat Jiraiya-sensei and Tsunade-sensei and Orochimaru all at once. I haven't even been able to beat Jiraiya-sensei in a spar yet, so how can I hope to match up to Hanzo? Yahiko wanted to shake the doubts out of his retarded friend, but he couldn't do that in his position. That, and Conan wouldn't approve, no matter how good the intentions. Nagato, Jiraiya-sensei has had years to study your battle style, and he knows the secrets of your Rinnegan, because you have enlisted his help in researching them, Conan calmly replied, beating Yahiko to the punch. Hanzo does not have that advantage. At best, he has only heard rumors of your exploits on the battlefield in this war. Stories can be exaggerated, or facts can be omitted, and so it's nearly certain that he knows next to nothing of your real abilities. Just calm your nerves, and look for an opening to finish him off however you can. Yahiko and I will draw his attention. I'm still not comfortable endangering your lives like this, Nagato murmured. The tick mark appeared on Yahiko's head. We know the risks, rings. Shinobi die every day in this war. If you don't want us to join the fallen, do your part and take out Hanzo. Conan narrowed her eyes at Yahiko again, but didn't correct him. After all, he had stated the truth. He could have put it in a nicer way, but that just wasn't who Yahiko was, the man lacked tact. At least when he was fed up like this, anyway. Nagato didn't reply to Yahiko's words. And he still didn't lift his head up. What Yahiko is trying to say, Nagato, is that we'll do our part in this battle. We won't unnecessarily endanger ourselves, but at the same time, we will do all that is within our power to complete this mission. You must do the same if we are to get out of this alive. We have faith in you. Nagato still didn't look totally convinced, but that didn't stop him from uttering a quiet "thank you." When the trio looked toward their destination again, they saw that they were almost there. In Hanzo's tower, a fist slammed into a metal wall, leaving a sizable dent. Hanzo had this tower built early in his career as the Hidden Rain Village's leader as a last resort haven. No one was supposed to have been able to reach him here, and yet, damn you, Danzo, damn you, Hanzo cursed. The unlucky messenger that had delivered the news of all the attacks that were taking place in his village had fled the moment he had given the total report, the moment when Hanzo's fist met the wall. Not only were the Sannin making a scene outside his tower, but his men were being cut down by Rude and Bulong before that assault. Rude had infiltrated his village, even after he explicitly told Danzo that he and his men were not welcome in the Hidden Rain village. There was very little Hanzo could do now. A covert multi-pronged assault like this was difficult to effectively repel, and Hanzo was certain that by the end of the day, many of his shinobi would be dead. Handachi. Hanzo roared furiously. A few moments later, a gray-haired young man with some type of scar on the upper right part of his head and wearing a rebreather came running up to his esteemed leader. Lord Hanzo, sir. Hanzo crossed his arms. Sound the retreat. Anyone who can flee is to leave the village and rendezvous just south of the village hidden in the grass. We are fighting too many battles, thanks to that damn foundation of Danzo's, and I will salvage as many men as I can. I will take care of the Sannin myself, and will join you in grass country after that. Once we have reorganized, we will take back the village from the foundation. Handachi looked just as displeased as Hanzo with having to retreat, but he knew not to question his leader, and so he ran off to spread the word. Once Handachi had left, Hanzo uncrossed his arms, clenched his fists, and resisted the urge to hit the wall again. The Hidden Leaf village would suffer for this. As Hanzo exited his quarters and made his way down a corridor, Hanzo's instincts kicked in. Water style. Water dragon jutsu. A moderately sized stream of water with a dragon head at the front shot down the corridor at Hanzo. Not wasting a single move, Hanzo threw 3 explosive tags at the approaching threat and detonated them before the attack got too close. The corridor took some damage from the blast, but it withstood the impact of the explosions. The water dragon did not, however. Wielding his kusarigama, Hanzo deflected the paper shuriken that came next. You were wise to confine me to a narrow battlefield, Hanzo conceded to his nameless assassins. But it will take much more than that to take me down. Let us see how you handle this. Running through 4 hand seals rapidly, Hanzo slammed a palm on the ground, unleashing dozens of explosive notes that shot in the direction of his enemies. All of them triggered at once when they reached a certain point down the corridor and made holes in the walls. Hanzo couldn't be sure if that attack hit, though the corridor was not lit very well. Deciding to not wait and see, Hanzo charged down the corridor and was only mildly surprised when his kusarigama clashed with a blade. When the smoke cleared and Hanzo could see better, he realized that he was fighting neither the Sannin nor any of Danzo's pawns. Who are you? Hanzo asked of his assailant as they stood there, sword and kusarigama not budging. Instead of answering the legendary shinobi, Yahiko cried, Conan, now. A moment later, after Yahiko had slightly gotten out of the way, Hanzo was barraged with explosive notes that blew him back several feet. Yahiko grumbled, you could have waited a moment longer before getting to his feet again. Hanzo recovered shortly after and caught a better sight of both his assailants. An orange-haired young man and a blue-haired young woman, both wearing Jonin flak jackets that symbolized their allegiance to the Hidden Leaf village. "You were wise to bring back up," Hanzo noted, standing up. "So the Hokage finally decided to have me taken down, however why is it that mere Jonin are undertaking my execution when the Sannin are outside? You would think that it would be the other way around. We're more than enough to take you down, Hanzo." Yahiko yelled, pointing accusingly at Hanzo with his sword. "You can't tell by looking at us, but we're natives of this land. We were born here and I swore I would never give up until you were overthrown, but a Hidden Leaf shinobi showed me kindness and he taught me the way of the shinobi. I repaid him by joining his village and now I have hundreds of comrades in arms, but I never forgot my dream of taking you down and now it's time that I realize that dream once and for all." Hanzo inclined his head and closed his eyes. "A touching story, to be sure," Hanzo snarked. "But the Hidden Rain does not suffer traitors. You ceased being under my protection the moment you fraternized with that leaf shinobi." Hanzo pointed back at Yahiko with his kusarigama. "And now you will die here because of your foolishness and treachery. Let us cease this useless prattle. I have Sannin to kill." "Couldn't agree more." Yahiko yelled at the top of his lungs as he and Hanzo ran through hand seals rapidly. "Water Dragon Jutsu." Hanzo slammed his palm on the floor again, an explosive note surged toward Yahiko and Konan. In addition, with his free hand, Hanzo threw 3 more explosive notes that destroyed the water dragon before it got too close again. Konan once again countered Hanzo's attack with explosive notes of her own that detonated Hanzo's before they could reach Yahiko. But smoke kicked up again and new holes made in the walls. It would have been a stalemate had Hanzo not thrown his kusarigama at Yahiko and made a deep cut in his chest. Yahiko fell backward and clutched his chest in agony. Konan's eyes widened as she cried, "Yahiko," and threw a barrage of paper shuriken at Hanzo, who pulled back his kusarigama but still ended up getting a few cuts due to not being able to dodge all the paper shuriken. Hanzo growled, annoyed, and charged his assailants again. When Hanzo reappeared through the smoke, Yahiko was still wincing and was still trying to get back to his feet so that Konan wouldn't have to deal with Hanzo alone. However, he needn't have worried. "Paper chakram," Konan said, holding up a disc-shaped item that was made up of many sheets of paper, rotating at intense speeds. She threw the paper chakram at Hanzo, who attempted to slice the weapon in half, but was shocked that his kusarigama failed to even damage the makeshift weapon. So he was forced to crane his head at the last moment in order to not get beheaded. The paper chakram left a huge gash in his shoulder and Hanzo clutched it momentarily. Taking advantage of this, Konan went on with her next attack. Shikigami Dance. Yahiko watched as his comrade became individual pieces of paper and charged Hanzo, some of the pieces of paper being explosive notes. Hanzo's eyes widened a fraction and threw a few more explosive notes at the oncoming flurry of paper. That worked in detonating many of the explosive notes, but the pieces of paper that made it through his counterattack made many tiny cuts in Hanzo's body. Konan reformed beside Yahiko and helped him to his feet. "Nicely done, Konan," Yahiko murmured. Konan gave him a small smile, but they quickly turned their attention back to Hanzo as he wasn't finished with them yet, apparently. "I underestimated you brats, but it's already over for your orange-haired friend, girl." Konan's eyes widened and she turned to Yahiko, who was indeed still clutching his chest. I'm fine," Konan. Yahiko coughed and wheezed out. Hanzo shook his head. "I assure you, you are far from fine. When I cut you, you were poisoned as well. You are finished. The woman is next." Hanzo took a step toward the two of them, but suddenly found himself pulled back by an unseen force. Universal pull. Hanzo skillfully swung his kusarigama backwards to attack his unknown third assailant, but it was deflected back by the assailant's kunai and he was stabbed in the back with said kunai. Hanzo grunted and bent forward and kneeled at the pain. Nagato was about to go in for the kill, but he hesitated and that was all Hanzo needed to recover and counterattack, whipping around and swinging his kusarigama at Nagato. However, Nagato's jutsu was usable again and he declared, "Almighty push." This sent Hanzo, still kneeling on the floor, flying back in the direction of Yahiko and Konan. Yahiko was in no condition to be fighting anymore, but Konan fashioned a spear out of paper and plunged it into the approaching Hanzo's back, missing a vital spot, which was not done out of the kindness of Konan's heart. Hanzo coughed violently in response to that vicious attack's effects on his body and he was forced to take off his rebreather now that he was coughing up blood. "Why you, brats." Hanzo couldn't remain sitting up after that attack and so fully fell on his back a few feet away from Konan and Yahiko. The paper spear had gone all the way through his back and chest and now he had a decent clean hole in his body. Konan turned her attention to Yahiko briefly, who was doubled over in pain. "Yahiko?" Konan cried. Yahiko winced painfully and tried to give Konan a reassuring grin. "I'm fine, Konan finish it." Konan was about to chastise him and demand that he go seek out Shizune when their attention was brought back to Hanzo at the sound of tearing cloth. To have to resort to this, I'm ashamed, Hanzo angrily bit out. A scar on his side could be seen, and Hanzo still had his Kusarigama in hand. I won't be protected, unfortunately, but if any of my men discover us, then they will finish you. Hanzo got ready to swing down his Kusarigama on his scar, but once again found himself victim to that unseen force's gravitational pull. Universal pull. Nagato bellowed. Hanzo came flying back towards him, and Nagato stopped his approach with his open palm. Nagato felt an odd sensation as Hanzo knelt there in front of him, while his hand was on the legendary shinobi's head. Nagato couldn't quite describe it. What is this, Nagato thought to himself. He couldn't dwell on these thoughts for long, though, Hanzo prepared to unleash the poison within his body again. This is the end for you all. Nagato didn't know what he was doing, but he suddenly found himself pulling some apparition out of Hanzo's body, slowly. Hanzo suddenly found that he was unable to move his body now. Nagato, mesmerized by the glowing ethereal apparition, kept pulling until it was separated from Hanzo's body completely. With his soul gone, Hanzo's lifeless husk crumpled to the ground and his Kusarigama clattered to the floor. Nagato looked on in shock as the soul then vanished. What just happened? Nagato let out in astonishment. Had they really just triumphed over Hanzo? Nagato was once again torn from his thoughts, this time because of Konan. Yahiko. Nagato rushed over to his two best friends. Yahiko was now lying on his back, clearly not well, and Konan stood over him, extremely worried. It's Hanzo's poison, Nagato explained, more to himself than Konan or Yahiko. Hanzo might have had an antidote on him. Nagato hurried to check Hanzo's torn uniform and was very relieved to find a vial in one of the pockets. Hurrying back over to Yahiko, Nagato opened the vial and held it to Yahiko's mouth. Take this, Yahiko, Nagato instructed. Konan grasped his wrist. Wait. How can we be sure that is the antidote? Konan looked at Nagato with pleading eyes, begging for reassurance. We don't. Nagato conceded, which made Konan chew her bottom lip. But if we sit here and do nothing, or try to take him to Shizune in this state, he might very well die. We have to try. Konan nervously nodded and turned her attention to Yahiko when he weakly spoke. Nagato's right, I promise I'll try not to die on you guys, okay, Yahiko croaked out, offering a weak chuckle. Konan tried to smile, but was too distraught. Nagato helped Yahiko swallow what they hoped was the antidote and then helped prop him up against a wall. They waited for a bit, about 15 minutes, and then Konan and Nagato took an arm each and carried him out of the tower to go find Shizune. Hours later, Shizune exited the hotel room shared by Yahiko and Nagato and wiped her brow with a cloth. She debriefed Jiraiya, Konan, and Nagato on Yahiko's condition. It was a bit touch and go there for a while, but I think he'll pull through. Shizune remarked, happy to relieve much of the tension in the room. I'm not Lady Tsunade, though. We should get him back to the Leaf for a more thorough examination. That vial that he took seems to have worked, but you can never be too careful. Jiraiya smiled amicably and placed a hand on Shizune's shoulder. Thanks for all your help, Shizune. I know this was probably your first life or death situation, but we sure appreciate the help and will gladly compensate you. Shizune grinned nervously. Not to sound rude, but that would be greatly appreciated. Lady Tsunade is constantly on the run, and Jiraiya laughed boisterously. I know. We'll return home in a couple of days, report in, and get your money. For now, we'll let Yahiko rest, eh? Shizune nodded in agreement. That would be for the best. We should all get some rest, to be honest. Orochimaru walked into the room with an amused look on his face. Most of the shinobi of this village that survived have surrendered. A few attempted to escape, but they were dealt with. Orochimaru chuckled. Jiraiya crossed his arms and gave Orochimaru a deadpan stare. We were trying to save as many lives as possible, Jiraiya drawled. Out of curiosity, was Kandachi captured? Or did he escape? The cuckoo, he was stirring up ideas of escape, but he was dealt with. Jiraiya sighed. Okay, so, he's dead then. At least this deals a huge blow to the leadership of this village. Jiraiya turned to Nagato and Konan and gave a toothy grin. That where you guys come in. Nagato and Konan shared a look and then both shook their heads. Our place is in the Leaf Village now, sensei. It's been years now since we called this place home. Nagato stated. The Hidden Rain Village will always hold a special place in our hearts. It can recover now, and that's what we wanted. We would like to share the same freedom with the rest of the world. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. If you guys aren't gonna step up, then who will? If you don't, the people here might get stepped on by the Great Five. Nagato rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and nervously smiled. About that, Konan, Yahiko, and I reached a decision, and if it's alright with you and Lord Hokage. Months later. You're late, Obito. Far too late, a boy wearing a mask that covered half his face chided. The boy was Kakashi Haddock, prodigal son of the esteemed White Fang. Kakashi did his best to stick to the shinobi rules of conduct and make his father proud. His father was now the leader of a neighboring nation, after all. As a result, the young Haddock was somewhat of a stickler who was always on his Uchiha teammate's case. Obito Uchiha was his polar opposite in personality and conduct. The young boy with spiky, messy hair and orange goggles grinned and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Oh, I'm sorry, Kakashi. Today was just not my day. I know we were supposed to be here early for accepting our mission, but well, there were just far too many people to help out today. I couldn't refuse to help the elderly, you know." Kakashi snorted and crossed his arms impatiently. "You always give the same excuse, Obito. Helping the elderly can be okay from time to time, but you're a shinobi. Your aim should be to help the whole of Konoha and not just a few elderly people. We're in the middle of a war now, and every second counts. For all we know, your tardiness cost us a valuable mission." Obito shot Kakashi a deadpan stare. "We're not the only shinobi," Kakashi Obito groused. "There'll be plenty of other missions." Kakashi's left brow twitched and he looked like he was about to chastise the Uchiha further when a soft female voice interrupted them in a placating way. "Kakashi, Obito, can't we all get along?" "Kakashi, Obito's right, there will be other missions for us to take." Obito shot a triumphant look at Kakashi and Kakashi shot an irritated look at Rin. "Although Obito, Kakashi's right too. You really need to do your best to arrive on time." Kakashi gave Obito a smug haughty look and Obito went back to looking embarrassed. Before either boy could start up the arguing again, though, their sensei stepped out of the Hokage's office. "Sorry about that, guys." The blonde young man rubbed the back of his head and smiled at his team. "We do have to take a different mission now, but Kakashi will still be in charge. I expect you all to work together, now." The statement was vague enough to mean all of them, but they all knew he was pointedly addressing Obito. The black sheep Uchiha looked at his whole team blinkingly. They were all looking at him. "What? Something on my face." Kakashi sighed breezily and dropped his arms to his sides. "Oh, nothing. This is just usually the part where you vehemently object to my leading the mission, even though I am your superior starting today. What, are you trying to be late in making complaints, too?" Obito blinked and realization dawned on him. "Oh. Right. Coco said that I should be more open-minded and that I should at least try to be friendlier to you, since you're my teammate and all. I still think you're an uptight prick, but I'm really trying to take Coco's advice to heart." Rin smiled pleasantly at this. Due to circumstances beyond his control, Obito was the black sheep of his clan. He still lived among the Uchiha, yet the Uchiha refused to train him personally until he awakened his Sharingan. He hadn't awakened it yet, and so Obito had to rely on outside help for training. Of course, an Uchiha without a Sharingan was looked down upon scornfully, even among the rest of the shinobi ranks. Well, mostly. Fortunately for Obito, he had found a sympathetic ear in Konan, and she had been assisting in his training ever since he became a genin. Hiko and Nagato also sympathized with him, but Obito spent most of his time with Konan when he wasn't with his team or helping out the elderly. Obito had introduced Ren to Konan as well, and they were all instant friends. Kakashi knew Koko, Yahiko, and Nagato through his father, before his job transfer that is, but he wasn't especially close to them yet. He somewhat kept his distance from them out of reverence to them. He greatly respected them and wished to reach their level through his effort alone. "That's a great attitude to have, Obito. I'm glad you're making the effort." Minato beamed at Obito, who seemed embarrassed with having to admit this to his team. Kakashi, naturally, didn't care at all what his Uchiha teammate thought of him. His father tried to get him to be more open and to befriend the Uchiha, but Kakashi just couldn't make the honest effort to do so. Obito was a complete contradiction of what a shinobi should be. He wore his emotions on his sleeve, was late to everything, showed little respect for authority, and neglected the rules of shinobi conduct. It was utterly disgraceful to Kakashi. But there was one thing that Kakashi grudgingly gave credit to the black sheep Uchiha for, and that was his unswerving loyalty to his village and his desire to protect his comrades. In that one small thing, Obito matched Tsukumo perfectly, though Kakashi loathed to admit it. "Let's just go." Kakashi grunted. And together, the team shunshined out of the administrative building. Once they had gotten a fair distance away from the Leaf Village, Minato had everyone stop so he could brief them on the new mission. Unfurling a scroll that contained a map of the land of Earth, Minato traced a finger along a road. "The day's mission entails us breaching the border of the land of Earth. Once inside, we'll begin targeting support troops of the Hidden Stone Village. Our intel has pinpointed at least 5 groups spread thin near the border. Due to the danger of going into the land of Earth, the Hokage has bumped this mission up from A to S rank. As I've mentioned, Kakashi will be leading this mission, but I will be breaking off from you and joining Master Jiraiya and Nagato in making a distraction so that you can swiftly take out these support groups. I would estimate that we would be able to supply such a distraction for 3 days at most. You 3 will have to be out of there once 3 days have passed." Obito looked up at Minato after gazing at the marked locations of the support groups. "Will there be any backup for us, sensei? I mean the 3 of us, taking out 5 support groups." Minato stared back at Obito and slowly shook his head. "I'm afraid we can't spare anyone, Obito. There will be others along with me, Master Jiraiya and Nagato, but we will need as many men as possible for the distraction to be effective." We have to direct the Hidden Stone's forces to us, make them think that our main objective is a head-on confrontation. Hopefully after seeing Nagato, Master Jiraiya and me, the Hidden Stone will fall for the ruse. You'll have 3 days to take out as many as the support groups as possible, don't overexert yourselves, however. If you can only take out 1 or 2, even that will help us greatly. Kakashi scoffed at Obito's seeming lack of faith in their abilities as a team. What? The crybaby Uchiha can't handle this mission. I can understand lacking faith in your own abilities, just don't diminish mine. I've been working on an assassination jutsu that's bound to make this mission a resounding success. Obito was heavily tempted to rise to the bait, but he held back for the time being. To relieve the anger that welled up inside him, Obito clenched his fists and took a deep calming breath. I was just asking if there would be backup, Kakashi. I wouldn't mind some more people watching our backs, but I'll settle for you and Rin. I trust you both implicitly. This garnered an eye roll from the young Haddock and a smile from Rin. Rin was just so happy that Obito was making an honest effort to get along with Kakashi. Kakashi was indifferent, as usual. Minato welled up with pride at Obito's attitude, like Rin. Be careful and watch each other's backs. We're counting on the 3 of you. Before they set out, Rin handed Kakashi a simple box. Here, this is for making Jonin. I made a personalized med kit for you. I adjusted a few things to make it easier for you to use. Kakashi blinked and accepted the gift. Thanks. He turned when Sensei reached into his pocket and pulled out one of his special kunai. Here's what I got for ya, a specially made kunai knife. It's a little heavy and unconventional, but you'll get used to it. Yeah, thanks Sensei. Kakashi said as he caught the knife by the handle. Finally, they all turned to Obito, who sighed wistfully and pulled out a scrap sheet of paper. Here, just take it. I know it's not much, but my family does know some lightning jutsu, though not a lot, and, well, since you're a lightning style user. Kakashi blinked in astonishment. Obito was willingly giving him a present for making Jonin. This was new. Taking the paper to make sure it wasn't some sort of prank, Kakashi could see a list of 5 lightning style jutsu with the hand signs and a basic description for each one below the name of each jutsu. There was a lightning jutsu for each ranking, from E to A rank. Thanks. Kakashi was still caught off guard. He'd have to try each jutsu later to test their legitimacy, but they looked real enough on paper. Minato grinned at the scene. Obito had come up with a thoughtful gift after all. He'd have to thank Konan later. Well, let's move out. Master Jiraiya and Nagato will be expecting me by the day's end tomorrow. And with that, they ran in the direction of the land of Earth. Needless to say, it didn't take them long to run into trouble. Sensei, I can smell some nin up ahead. They don't seem to carry the scent of the Leaf Village, or any scent reminiscent of that. Minato stiffly nodded. Alright, let's not make any assumptions. We'll adopt a wait-and-see approach for now. Minato said, and then motioned for everyone to scatter and hide amongst the trees they were traversing. A scarce 20 seconds later, 2 men in grey uniforms that had their right arms bare plainly trod on the forest floor below. Team Minato didn't make a sound as they were awaiting further clarification, as the men's headbands seemed to bear the insignia of the Hidden Stone Village. The men could just be 2 leaf shinobi under a transformation jutsu. Man, what's taking Takeshi so long? One of the nameless shinobi grumbled. He sported a black afro and appeared to have not shaved in weeks. He had to break off to take care of something. Don't worry your pretty little head. The other man responded ominously. He had a black goatee and a large nose that made him stand out. The man with the afro cursed and spat at a random tree. You're always defending Takeshi. What if he's actually shirking his duties this time? Nobody's friggin' perfect. That may be so, but you and I both know that Takeshi is a professional and wouldn't neglect his duties. He's always on your case, Shiro. Goatee man muttered. Shut up, Genzo. Lord Tsuchikage will see my talents for what they truly are someday. And then Takeshi will get his. That was all Kakashi needed to hear. Without first consulting Minato-sensei, Kakashi ran through some hand seals for the new jutsu he developed. Chidori crackled to life, and the noise had the stone nin on high alert. Kakashi leaped down to the forest floor and ran straight up behind Genzo, and he jabbed the Chidori straight through the man's back. The other man, Shiro, was shocked at first, but he quickly regained his composure, took hold of Kakashi's arm, which was now jammed inside of Genzo, and delivered a sharp kick to Kakashi's rib. Nobody messes with a hidden stone. Shiro growled and watched as Genzo dropped to the ground, lifeless. TCH pathetic. Shiro manhandled Kakashi, who was now clutching his bruised rib, and roughly threw the boy against a tree. Then he began slugging Kakashi left and right. However, a few moments later, a kunai was suddenly lodged in Shiro's neck and the stone nin breathed no more. Nice shot, Obito, Minato complimented as he, Rin, and Obito landed on the forest floor and made their way to Kakashi. Obito nervously rubbed the back of his head and couldn't hide his bashfulness. The guy was just standing there. It wasn't that hard, Minato-sensei. Minato smiled serenely at Obito. You protected your comrade, Obito. That's what counts. Whether the target is moving or immobile, it takes great accuracy to hit a fatal point from a distance away like that. You've improved considerably well, and that's something to be proud of. Obito continued looking bashful, and Rin took off her backpack to get out her medical kit. Kakashi winced due to the beating that he had just taken. I'll get you fixed up in no time, Kakashi. Due to letting their guard down, Team Minato failed to notice the stone nin that snuck up behind Rin. It was all so sudden, and the stone nin spirited her away to a tree branch up high. Holding a kunai against her throat, the stone nin called down to the rest of Team Minato menacingly. Genzo and Shiro were idiots, I sensed you leaf trash coming from a mile away. If you want this girl to live, then listen up, because this is how things are going to go. Craning his head toward Obito, he motioned in Minato's direction. Ichiharunt is gonna take out Blondie there. After that, I might let you all go quietly. All depends how generous I'm feeling, you got me? You trash actually did me a favor by taking out Genzo and Shiro. They were worthless grunts and were holding me back. Obito looked to Minato-sensei pleadingly. He didn't want any of his comrades to perish here. Obito couldn't do anything in this situation, no doubt the stone nin would eliminate Rin if he made the slightest movement to attack him. Minato watched the stone nin sternly and with a cool gaze. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out one of his kunai knives, which made the stone nin tense and grasp Rin harder. Better not be any funny business, leaf trash. Minato silently nodded and tossed the knife over to Obito. Obito didn't even move to catch it, and the knife dug into the ground near him. Obito looked at Minato with wide petrified eyes, which Minato returned with a sharp calculating gaze. The stone nin hollered down again when Obito didn't make a move. Are you gonna take out Blondie or not? Or do you want the girl to die, Uchiha scum? Obito flinched and clenched his fists. Tears threatened to come out and he hesitantly crouched down to dislodge the kunai knife from the dirt. He held the knife up and looked from the stone nin up in the tree to Minato-sensei. Only then did Obito notice Minato-sensei signaling him with his eyes. Minato's gaze traveled from Obito to the man holding Rin hostage in the tree 3 times, just to make sure Obito got the signal. Obito blinked and gripped the handle of the knife. He gulped and swiftly tossed the knife at the stone nin, who sneered at Obito's seemingly naive move. I warned you, scum, now the girl dies. However, before the man could even carry out his threat, Minato suddenly vanished from Obito's side and appeared in front of the stone nin's face, holding the kunai knife in one hand. Minato swung a fist at the shocked man's face, sending the enemy ninja falling to the forest floor below. Minato deftly caught Rin and Sunshine back to Obito's side, gently placing her on the ground. It's alright, Rin, I'm sorry about that. Minato apologized, concern etched on his facial features. Standing back up, he gave Obito a serious glance. Obito, I'm going to have a chat with our bold friend over there. Can you look after Rin and Kakashi in case other enemies are nearby? Obito numbly nodded and watched his sensei disappear in a swirl of leaves. Minato-sensei was so awesome. A few minutes later, Minato returned and Kakashi had been patched up by Rin. No other enemies seemed to be in the immediate area and so the 2 Chunin and newly minted Jonin had relaxed a minuscule amount. It was kind of hard to lower their guard completely after being ambushed. Did you get him to talk? Kakashi asked without preamble. Minato frowned and nodded. The 3 we just took out happened to be one team that was a part of a surprise attack division, comprised of several teams sent to infiltrate the Land of Fire and stir up confusion. Before we move on, I'll need to alert Lord Third to this new development. Kakashi, think you can spare one of your ninja hounds to pass along the message? At Kakashi's minute nod, Minato took out a scroll and scribbled furtively on it while Kakashi summoned Pakin. Yo. Pakin greeted Team Minato. What'll it be today? Minato handed Kakashi the scroll after rolling it back up and he in turn strapped the scroll to Pakin's back. Need you to return this to the leaf and give it to Lord Third, Minato explained to the ninja hound. Think you can do that? Pakin gave a small shrug. Not in my usual repertoire, but sure. I can play delivery dog. Minato nodded in silent gratitude and told the dog to head southeast to return to the Leaf Village. Once Pakin got a general understanding of how far Team Minato had traversed since leaving the Leaf Village, he was off. With that out of the way, Minato turned back to his students. Alright, that took away a little time, but we should still be able to reach our destination on time. Delaying their journey no further, Team Minato was off. The evening the next day, Minato halted in his tracks, the road went on from there, but this was where they parted ways. Well, this is where we part ways, Minato said, looking over his shoulder. You'll have to be careful from here on out, not only are you in enemy territory, but you're also increasingly visible in this landscape. Once you're spotted, you will be ambushed. Be on your guard. Yes, sensei. Kakashi, Rin, and Obito chorused. Minato smiled, turning to Kakashi briefly. This is more or less your show now, Kakashi. You and your teammates are in your capable hands. What you choose to do is entirely your choice. I wish you luck. Minato extended his hand, which Kakashi shook. Yes, sensei. Good luck to you as well. Team Minato parted ways after that was said. Minato went to join up with Nagato and Jiraiya, and Kakashi, Rin, and Obito covertly infiltrated the land of Earth, headed to the rough location of the first support group. Thankfully for them, they had the cover of night to compensate for the loss of trees to hide them. They were still out in the open in enemy territory, though. We're approaching the first support group. I can smell them. Kakashi alerted his teammates. Rin and Obito both tensed a little. This is where the mission truly began. So where are they? Obito whispered. Abruptly, Kakashi stopped running, and he extended his arms so that Rin and Obito would stop as well. Looking downward, the three of them saw a small campfire burning, with 5 shinobi huddled around it. Only 5. We can take him. Obito punched his open palm. SHH. Not so loud. Rin lectured Obito. Kakashi gave Obito a dry look. I would rather not take them all at once, thank you. As talented as I am, I couldn't take on more than one with my Chidori, you know that, idiot. Rin crossed her arms and sternly looked at Kakashi. Sensei said not to use that anymore. Kakashi shook his head. He advised me not to use it. Kakashi corrected her. If I can guarantee that nothing is in my blind spots, I can use it and take them out in one attack. If you or Obito can sufficiently distract the enemy, I can go in for a nice clean kill. Simple. And let you take all the glory, Obito roared. Rin abruptly smothered his mouth. SHH. Down below, the stone nin had heard the yell. What was that? Another voice muttered, Ishii, go check it out. Yamashita, go back him up. A third voice grumbled, but the speaker stood up. A second person stood up to go with the man. Kakashi palmed his face. New plan. I'll kill one, you guys keep the other preoccupied until I can free myself. Kakashi Rin's voice was chilly, and she was glaring at Kakashi for once. I'm the team leader now. Kakashi asserted his authority. This is the most viable plan right now. We'll deal with the other 3 when we get past these 2. Obito grunted and got in a fighting stance. Rin very reluctantly got into a position that could support Obito, and Kakashi separated himself from Obito and Rin so that he could take out one of the approaching foes. When the 2 stone nin reached the top, they saw only Obito and Rin. Well, isn't it past your bedtime, brats? The man sneered. More than that, ain't it a bit early to be dating? You're just kids. The woman chimed in. Obito blushed, and Rin got a tick mark on her head, but didn't rise to the bait. The female stone nin cackled. Ain't this cute? The kiddies think their little friend is sneaky. Ishii, be careful of Yamashita, heard Ishii cough violently and turned to see that the third brat that she sensed had already done his little trick. Shit. With Yamashita momentarily distracted, Obito rapidly ran through hand seals and declared, fire style. Fireball jutsu. Yamashita's eyes widened, but it was too late for her to dodge. The fireball hit her head on, and she went flying back over the edge of the small gorge. Her flaming corpse landed close to her remaining comrades. This resulted in the remaining 3 stone nin rising and ascending to where their comrades had perished. Kakashi had dislodged his arm from Ishii's chest, and he was dryly looking at Obito again. You had to take her out like that? Really? Obito rubbed the back of his head. It got the job done. And now the rest of the enemy shinobi are on their way up here. Kakashi rolled his eyes. Obito suddenly looked like a deer caught in a deadly jutsu. Oh. Obito said, dropping his arms to his sides. Yeah. Kakashi sarcastically replied. Oh. Boys, Rin said in a frosty voice. Kakashi and Obito immediately stopped bickering. The 3 stone nin finally reached the top and the leader heaved a sigh. Great. Ishii and Yamashita were taken out by a bunch of brats. That's going to look so good on our incident report. The brat that's the spitting image of the white fang is mine. The stone nin on the right said, clutching his tanto. The one on the left shrugged noncommittally and said, sure, I guess I'll take the Uchiha brat. The leader shook his head. I'll capture the girl and come and help out one of you. I don't give a shit either way. Kakashi shot Obito a meaningful look. I sure hope those techniques work, idiot. Obito cracked his knuckles. They work. Sheesh. When we finish our fights, we have to protect Rin. Rin glowered at Obito a little. I don't need to be protected all the time, Obito, she added, just be careful. Obito nodded in acceptance and readied himself for his opponent, who was just casually standing there. Kakashi's opponent and Rin's opponent rushed them respectively. Hope you're ready, Ichiharunt. Obito's opponent smirked. He ran through many hand seals and eventually slammed his palms on the ground. Earth style. Destructive rising rock pillars. The leader of the stone nin growled at hearing that. Takeda, you idiot. The leader hopped off the ground and tried to get as far away as possible. Takeda was going in for a one-hit KO with that move. Kakashi's opponent didn't seem to care as he clashed with Kakashi, blade to blade. A huge pillar arose from the earth near Obito's location, which Obito hopped on top of, fueling chakra into his feet to keep him planted firmly on it. Aftershocks occurred because of this, and yet there were no casualties because Rin had taken the hint from the leader and gained some distance before the attack finished, and Kakashi and his opponent were just outside the vicinity of the attack. Obito failed to notice his opponent running up the other side of the pillar and barely defended himself when the man suddenly lunged to the top of the pillar with a kunai brandished. Obito released his chakra from his feet and allowed himself to slide to the opposite edge of the top of the pillar. He ran through the same hand seals he did earlier and cried, "Fire style. Fireball jutsu." Nikita stuck to the top of the pillar, chakra channeled to his feet, but the fireball still burned him badly. Takeda hurried to Obito's side of the pillar, but had to retreat to a safer distance after another fireball was sent his way. He attempted one more shot at reaching Obito, but Obito shot yet another fireball, which Takeda easily dodged. But Obito expected this, and he dashed at the stone nin, kunai in front of him. The kunai connected with Takeda's heart, and the man breathed no more. Obito wiped sweat from his forehead and turned to Rin and Kakashi's battles. They were still going on. "I'll admit, you're lasting than I thought you would, girly," Rin's opponent conceded. "But you're still going to be captured." Rin dodged another stone punch. The man had completely coated his hands with rocks and it made his taijutsu all the more dangerous. However, the rest of his body was still all skin and that made him mostly vulnerable still. All Rin had to do was hit a vital spot, but of course the man made that all but impossible with his impressive stone fist attacks. All she needed was a distraction. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. A stone nin glanced behind himself but couldn't dodge the massive fireball. He was pushed forward in Rin's direction. Rin plunged her kunai into the man's jugular. Blood sprayed all over Rin, but the man was dead, finally. Wiping herself clean a little, Rin smiled appreciatively at Obito, who had finally managed to make it over to her. "Thanks Obito. So you won your fight." "Yeah, it wasn't all that hard, actually." Obito rubbed the back of his head sheepishly at Rin's praise, but didn't get to tell how awesome he was because their attention was drawn to Kakashi. "Lightning style. Lightning beast running." Kakashi roared fiercely. Obito and Rin watched in awe as a hound made of pure lightning seemed to appear out of Kakashi's right hand. The remaining stone nin cursed and attempted to flee, but Kakashi wasn't having any of that. He guided the hound as it gave chase. The last stone nin, in a desperate move, threw his tanto at Kakashi who was standing still. Kakashi leaped back and dodged the projectile, but made sure that his lightning hound kept charging. The stone nin cried out in agony when the hound finally caught up to him and electrocuted him. He crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Kakashi threw his own tanto into the head of the stone nin, just to be sure the job was really done. The man didn't get up. As Kakashi went to collect his tanto, Rin and Obito joined him. "That was so friggin' cool, Kakashi." Obito excitedly gushed, for once praising the young prodigy. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at Obito. "You're the one who gave me the technique, idiot. Didn't you know what it looked like?" Obito shook his head negatively. "I can't do lightning style, and neither can any Uchiha that I know personally. So no, I haven't seen it before. It's so flippin' epic." Kakashi sighed, but managed a small smile all the same. "Well, I guess I should thank you for the technique. At least out of those 5, the B rank is useful." Obito pointed accusingly at Kakashi. "I told you they all work. But I have yet to see the other 4 work." Kakashi I smiled, which flipped Obito off a little. "Idiot." Obito harumphed and crossed his arms, turning away from Kakashi. Rin held up her hands. "Okay, guys, calm down. We dispatched this group, but there's still 4 more. We have 3 days to eliminate as many of them as possible." Kakashi smirked under his mask. "It'll be doable if the idiot here keeps pulling his weight like this." Obito whipped back around to point at Kakashi accusingly again. "You're the idiot for not believing me, idiot." Obito said, a tick mark on his head. Kakashi laughed. Not haughtily or coldly, Kakashi laughed a real genuine laugh, and Obito and Rin would never forget it. And they so badly wanted to keep Kakashi in good spirits like this. With Minato, Nagato, and Jiraiya, night had long since fallen, and Jiraiya had broken off the assault for the time being. Up until Minato's arrival, he and Nagato had been the juggernauts that the stone forces had to deal with, and they weren't doing half bad. But when Minato showed up, well, needless to say, Stone's forces fell back to wait for more reinforcements. Jiraiya had the 500-leaf shinobi pursue them for a little while to keep up appearances, but had them fall back, too, when night fell. Jiraiya, Nagato, and Minato sat around a small fire after eating a meager dinner. None of them felt particularly tired yet, and the nightly watch was being kept by other individuals. The hidden stone must have been quite surprised by our large-scale attack. Nagato struck up a conversation with his sensei and sibling disciple. Jiraiya gave a hearty laugh. "Did you see the look on their faces when you showed up, Minato? You're gaining quite the reputation." Minato ran his hand through his hair and smiled sheepishly. "I'm not the one that was summoning frogs or animals the size of houses. But we weren't the ones zipping about, taking down stone shinobi like they were going out of fashion. Nagato smirked as Minato's cheeks gained some color due to embarrassment. Well, Minato tried to counter. I don't have the Rinnegan. Nagato and Jiraiya laughed lightly at Minato's attempt at a comeback. But you are efficient at sealing while I am not, Nagato playfully continued to argue. Go on, we can keep going for hours, I'm sure. Minato flushed, but ceased the argument of awesomeness for now. He'd definitely get back at Nagato later, after the war was over. Silence reigned for several moments after their playful banter, until Jiraiya spoke up again. It's probably gonna be rougher tomorrow, Jiraiya said, steering the discussion to a more serious topic. Inoki will no doubt have sent reinforcements. It was fun tonight, but that old fence-sitter doesn't like being pushed around, least of all by the leaf. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Katsuchi, Rashi, and Orhan tomorrow. What of the support groups? I'm sure there weren't too many people in each group before they were attacked today. Do you think that Inoki will send more troops to back up the support units as well? Jiraiya shrugged unknowingly. Maybe, but I think it's more likely we'll be experiencing the heavier stuff. Inoki will want us out of his country and then he might reinforce the support troops in case of future assaults. If Minato's kids do their job, communication between the support groups will be messed up big time. Minato shook his head. You're talking like this is an actual attack, sensei. Our targets are the support groups. Jiraiya waved him off. Yeah, but if we take out a good number of stone shinobi here, the hidden stone will be less of a headache later in this war. I'm not saying we have to succeed in this pseudo-siege, but it wouldn't be bad to be somewhat successful on our part. We have to at least keep up appearances, and what better way than aiming to take out as many stone shinobi as possible. Minato didn't look so certain, but he nodded hesitantly. I guess. Nagato turned to face Minato. How are your students, by the way? Obito and Kakashi still going at it? Minato ran his hand through his hair again. Yeah, they do tend to quarrel a lot, but it'll get better. I hope little Kakashi's dad isn't around to help him train, so Kakashi is seriously striving to make his father proud and Obito annoys him to death with his habits. At least Rin does a pretty good job of keeping the peace between them as a team. She doesn't allow her crush on Kakashi to interfere with her interaction with Obito, which is very fortunate. I don't want to think what the team dynamic would be if she allowed her affections free rein. And doesn't Obito have a crush on Rin? Jiraiya let out a perverse giggle. Gotta love triangles. Minato sighed and closed his eyes. Yes, he does. Both of them lack the courage to let the object of their affections know their true feelings. If it ever gets in the way of their work ethic or teamwork, I'll need to nip that problem in the bud, no matter how inspirational you find that for your research, sensei. You're no fun, Jiraiya groused. Nagato dully looked at Jiraiya. Stick to writing morally engaging plots with believable characters, sensei. I don't care if Tales of a Gutsy Ninja isn't selling well, that novel was quite good. Jiraiya shook his head. But, I said no. Nagato said with finality. Or I'll tell Konan. Jiraiya and Minato both shuddered at that. Konan did not like Jiraiya's research at all. If she found out he was planning on incorporating that research into his stories, well, okay. Let's not be so hasty. Jiraiya held up his hands peaceably. I'm not the one whose perversity is one step away from running rampant, sensei. Jiraiya nervously laughed and rubbed the back of his head. At least Nagato didn't know he had plans for a series called Icha Paradise yet. No need to let him know until it was too late to do anything. I won't write smut, Nagato, Jiraiya placated his retarded student. Just romance novels. Nagato didn't look thoroughly convinced, but he'd let it go for now. Soon after that, the three called it a night and went to bed. Early the next morning, let's not try to have any screw-ups like last night, Kakashi said loud enough for his team to hear as they observed the second support group out in the middle of a vast plain. They were hidden by some slightly tall grass as they lay there, observing the stone nin. Obito got a tick mark on his head as he glowered at the back of Kakashi's head. Hey. I said I was sorry. Obito said in a hushed tone. Kakashi didn't deign to look his way. Rin sighed and patted Obito on the back. I know you didn't mean it, Obito. Rin comforted her teammate, who appeared happy to receive her comfort. Just be more careful, alright. I will. Obito promised with a determined look on his face. Kakashi, having largely ignored the small exchange, spoke up again. There are 7 of them this time. We'll need to be far more careful. Not that it'll be very hard to be more careful than we were last night. Kakashi deadpanned. Anyway, taking out this group will be harder, and not just because they outnumber us 2-1. This group is in the middle of an open field. While that might make them easily visible, they will also see us coming long before we can get to them. Obito scratched his head. So just send in a shadow clone or 2 and try and split them up. Obito anxiously replied. Kakashi shot him a deadpan stare. There is a reason I'm team leader, and it's not just because I'm Jonin, Kakashi drawled. Honestly, shadow clones, while they might be more durable and useful than the regular clone, can still be dispelled pretty easily. Plus, there's no guarantee that we will be able to split them up. Obito grunted. So what do we do, Commander? Obito shivered a bit after that rolled off his tongue. He was still getting used to the idea of Kakashi being his superior. Kakashi closed his eyes to ponder for a moment. We will hit them with our best long-range attacks while they're still huddled together like that. Even if we don't kill them all, we should still take out one or two at the very minimum. From there I'm not sure what we can do. This battle situation is not very favorable at all. Rin tried to present another solution. So let's move on to the next. We can come back for these guys after we take out the other support groups. Kakashi only shook his head. I'm being deliberate in the order that we take out the support groups. The first one that we took out was closest to the battle that Minato-sensei, Master Jiraiya and Nagato are fighting. This one's the second closest. I want to work our way to the farthest support group from that battle so that at the very least the Hidden Stone's backup will be delayed. I'm confident that we can handle these guys, it's just going to be a little risky. Combat doesn't always go the way we want, Obito argued. Do you seriously want to endanger us like this? Kakashi took a few moments to reply. You know the risks of becoming a shinobi, Obito. We need to do everything we can to fulfill our quota for this mission. You will assist me in taking out these stone nin. Obito growled irritably, but didn't bother arguing anymore. Once an idea got stuck in Kakashi's head, he was too stubborn to be deterred from it. Obito conveniently ignored the fact that the same could be said about him. Just keep Rin safe, that's all I ask. Kakashi nodded, and he and Obito ran through the hand seals for their attacks. Lightning style. Lightning beast running. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Kakashi's lightning hound and Obito's fireball raced toward the enemy ninja, and the sensor of the group noticed the attacks too late. Incoming. The area where the stone nin were had exploded and a vast amount of smoke was kicked up. Obito whooped and cheered, but Kakashi chastised him and ordered him to get down. Kakashi, Rin, and Obito observed the damaged site for what seemed like forever. Eventually, 4 figures emerged from the smoke. Basatero location. Now. One stone nin barked succinctly. He was distinguished by brown afro hair and a clean-shaven face. The censor of the group, Masateru, concentrated and held up his right index and middle fingers as he used his sensory jutsu. He had a bandage on his right cheek and a blue bandana that covered his tame black hair. Eventually, he pointed in the direction of Kakashi, Obito, and Rin. Over there, sir. Just a bunch of brats. 3 of them. The leader snorted derisively. Whatever. Go wipe them out, sweep and clear. He spat. At that command, all 4 charged Kakashi, Rin, and Obito. The 3 leaped to their feet and Obito shot out another fireball. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. The leading stone nin's comrade split off from him and the man himself just stood there as the fireball rushed at him. The man made the snake hand seal and he somehow survived a fireball, barely getting singed, at least that's what it looked like from Kakashi, Rin, and Obito's perspective. They didn't have time to dwell on that though. The other 3 stone nin were going in for taijutsu battles. Masateru ended up battling Obito, which is why he was shocked when the Uchiha popped out of existence from just one punch. Quickly using his sensory jutsu again, Masateru alerted his leader. Boss, they're all fire style. Fireball jutsu. Lightning style. Lightning beast running. The sensor quickly got out of the blast range, but the other 2 stone nin battling the shadow clones of Rin and Kakashi weren't so lucky. The leader grumbled irritably as his sensor leaped to his side. Boss, I don't care, Masateru. The leader cut him off. We suffered casualties, but now the brats are going to be easier to deal with, they've been spamming high-level jutsu, and that will make our job easier. If you got a general location of their whereabouts, let's go. Why yes sir. Kakashi and Obito were both out of breath, a ways away from the remaining stone nin. After their first attack, Kakashi had shown them the hand seal to create shadow clones, and had then used the shunshin to escape to a safe distance while their shadow clones posed as them. They were on the ground again, hoping that the remaining stone nin hadn't caught sight of them, they were almost out of parlor tricks. Kakashi, thanks for teaching us the shadow clone jutsu, Obito wheezed out. Rin nodded in silent agreement. Kakashi took a deep breath. We're not done yet. 2 more still. The sensor's still around too, so we don't have much time. I don't know about you, but I'm below half my chakra reserves now, Obito. Obito inhaled and exhaled. I'm not much better. You didn't mention the shadow clone jutsu was that bad. I can normally spam out more fireballs than this. No time to worry about that now, Kakashi grumbled. Let's kill these last 2 with taijutsu and be done with the support group. Here they come. Rin alerted Kakashi and Obito. The 3 of them leaped to their feet again. Obito exchanged punches with Masateru and the punches smashed into their faces simultaneously. Both flew back from the impact. Kakashi went after the leader and it turned into a slugfest. Blows were exchanged, but punches were mostly blocked by wrists, elbows, and arms. The stone nin attempted to kick Kakashi, but Kakashi caught the leg and kicked the stone nin back. The stone nin ended up on his back. Rin leaped over the man and threw a kunai accurately at the man's heart, but the man snatched it out of the air and got a nasty cut on his hand because of it. Nice try, brat, the stone nin grunted, tossing the metal object right back at Rin, which she dodged. Sitting up, the stone nin clenched his bloodied hand and growled. I'm gonna fucking murder you brats. Captain Ryuta, look out. Masateru cried. Ryuta looked up in time to see another fireball headed his way. He cursed under his breath and performed the snake hand seal once again. And again he survived. You brats are persistent, I'll give you that. Ryuta heard a gurgling sound and turned to find Masateru on the ground, a kunai buried in his neck. TCH. Pathetic, can't even handle 3 brats. You're outnumbered. Kakashi warned the stone nin. Just surrender and your death will be quick. Ryuta rolled his eyes at Kakashi. There is a reason Lord Tsuchikage put me in support and it wasn't because I was too wimpy to handle the front lines. The cannon fodder you wiped out fit that stereotype. Lord Tsuchikage wanted someone strong out here in case there were any problems. I'm no Kitsuchi, but I've had my fair share of clusterfucks that I've lived through. This will be no different. Kakashi med thoughtfully. I happened to notice that you make that snake hand seal when you survived Obito's fireball jutsu. You're using earth style to survive attacks like that, somehow. Ryuta barked with laughter. So you noticed? Big deal. You're still dead, kid. Kakashi stared at Ryuta for a few moments, then he cried, Obito, now. Ryuta whipped around to see the Ichiharan perform the hand seals for his jutsu, and then a fireball emerged from his mouth again. Ryuta did the same thing a third time. Not gonna cut it, punks. Ryuta cackled. Then he tensed as he heard Kakashi behind him. What the? Really, Chidori? Kakashi's Chidori went straight through Ryuta's heart. Then Kakashi used Ryuta's body as a shield for Obito's fireball, which still singed him a little, but luckily the body he held took the brunt of the fire. Obito cheered once again, as the battle had now officially ended in their favor. We won. Obito laughed. Kakashi unceremoniously dropped Ryuta's corpse to the ground after removing his hand from it and then shot a dry look at Obito. That took way too much chakra, though. We're going to have to rest a while before moving on. I want to take out at least one more support group today. Obito waved dismissively. Relax, Kakashi. We're, like, halfway to mission completion. We still got 2 whole days to do it, too. Kakashi shot him a withering glare. Your very existence being a contradiction. I'm not sure if you can understand this, but Minato-sensei said that was at most. And besides, we're in enemy territory. Don't you want to get out of here as soon as possible? The faster we complete this mission, the better it will look on our record, too. Obito shrugged nonchalantly. I guess. I have faith in Minato-sensei, though, Obito proclaimed. He'll hold off the enemy for the maximum amount of time. There is such a thing as overestimating someone's abilities. Obito, try and be realistic. Kakashi deadpanned. Rin got between the two bickering boys. Boys, let's calm down and find somewhere to hide and recuperate. We might have defeated the enemy here, but we're still in their territory and wandering shinobi can still find us out here. Kakashi nodded in agreement. Rin's right. We can begin to make our way to the next support group, but we won't get too close because we still have to recover. Got that, Obito? Obito glared daggers at Kakashi, but gave in all the same. Yeah. Later that day, Kakashi, Rin, and Obito had taken refuge in a cave roughly a mile away from their next target. Kakashi and Obito sat across from each other as Rin continued to nap. Obito started up a conversation with Kakashi after a while. So, have the enemies been jonin so far? That'd be pretty cool if they were. Kakashi shook his head at Obito's flight of fancy. No, based on the intel that Minato-sensei imparted to me, they've been chunin for the most part, with the occasional jonin thrown in. The leader of the last group was definitely jonin, but everyone else seemed chunin at best. Our intel gathered that there wasn't anyone particularly strong amongst these support troops, but intel's not always accurate. Hard to say what the rest of the groups will be like. Silence ensued after that. Obito appeared to be mulling something over, but he eventually gained the courage to pose his next question. I can't believe I'm asking you this, but what's it like to have the White Fang as a dad? It must be so cool. I wish I knew my dad growing up. For once, Kakashi didn't seem all that irritated talking to Obito. He seemed kinda pleased that his dad was brought up. Well, it's a blessing and a curse, really. Yes, it's cool to have a father that is infamously strong and willing to teach you how to be a shinobi, but at the same time, dad's made a lot of enemies, and now with his new position in the Hidden Rain village, well, let's just say his reputation has escalated. Obito looked at Kakashi in awe. What is the story behind that, anyway? It's kinda weird for your dad, who's a native of the Leaf Village, to be a leader of a foreign village. Kakashi shrugged. I don't know the full details. A few years ago, dad came back from a mission and was very depressed. Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan were pretty persistent in staying by his side for a while, and that's when dad started spending a lot more time with me. But even as he did so, I could still tell he was sad. Then a few months ago he got approached by the Hokage and, well, the rest is history. I speculate it had to do something with his depression, but I'm not certain. Obito crossed his arms and scrunched up his face in thought. Do you think it had something to do with that mission? It's hard to believe a mission went wrong for him. Kakashi shook his head. Even legendary shinobi have bad days. Of course it had to do with that mission, I'm sure about that. What I don't get is why he'd be depressed about saving the lives of his comrades. Kakashi explained. Obito's eyes bugged out. That was the mission your dad came home depressed about. I heard from Koko that one time the White Fang saved his teammates' lives instead of continuing on with the mission. He's been my hero ever since Koko told me about that. Kakashi stared at Obito appraisingly. As I said, his attitude confused me. He seemed too depressed for it simply to be about the mission's outcome. He didn't regret saving his teammates, he told me that much, but he wouldn't share what made him so sad. When walking about with my dad in the village, I did notice that some people were treating him differently, but nobody would tell me why, and I couldn't ascertain the reason for their behavior. He seems to be doing better in the Hidden Rain village, at least. Well, at least something good came of his promotion, I guess, Obito conceded. Beyond the rise in reputation, I mean. Kakashi nodded. Yeah, turning to look at the snoozing Rin, he said, why don't we move out? I'm rested up now and should be able to handle the next group. How about you? Obito got up and stretched. I'm good too. Punching his fist into his open palm, he grinned. Let's go bash some stone in. Getting up and walking to the entrance to the cave, Kakashi said, well, wake up Rin and we'll get moving. Obito's face flushed. Hurry up, Obito. We've got ground to cover. Kakashi called back to him as he left the cave. Obito stared down at Rin. Ground to cover? We're a mile away. Obito whined in all futility. Kakashi couldn't hear him now and he was the only one who could wake up Rin now. Bastard. 10 minutes later, Kakashi, Rin, and Obito were behind a large boulder as they were only a few yards away from their third target. Kakashi was taking quick glances as the enemy was more cautious of their surroundings this time. 10 of them this time. Kakashi reported in a hushed tone. How do we do this? Obito tensed at that. D10 they outnumber us 3-1. This area must be sensitive if the enemies fortified the area like this, Rin surmised. Did our intel reveal anything special regarding this area, Kakashi? No, Kakashi denied. We are close to the border here, that could be it. Whatever the case, we'll need to try and split the enemy up this time. Rin stated. It's too dangerous to take them all at once. Kakashi leaned against a boulder and ran his hand through his hair. We can't pull off a shadow clone distraction again, that was too risky last time, and that stone nin might have beaten us if he endured our attacks for a little longer, but it worked. Obito argued. He yelped in pain when Rin pulled his ear. Ow. Too risky. Rin stressed as she stared at him sternly. Obito massaged his ear and didn't bother to argue the point anymore. So what do we do? Obito queried. Kakashi tapped his chin and thought. Might be necessary to bring in the ninja hounds. It'll cost me some chakra, but I think it'll even us out a bit in terms of numbers. Obito blinked in astonishment. But can they keep the others occupied as we take them out? Obito paused a moment. Wait, if you could summon these ninja hounds, why didn't you do it the last time? We could have really used their help. Shut up, Obito, now's not the time, Kakashi grumbled. You forgot, didn't you? Oh man, I'm not gonna forget this. The great Kakashi Haddock made a mistake, Obito grinned like a fool. Kakashi rolled his eyes but refused to comment further on that. Dad gave me a pack of 8 dogs to take care of, but they're not quite veterans, they'll be able to help. Just don't expect them to take down all of our opponents for us. We'll still be fighting an uphill battle. Fine, Obito blew him off. He crossed his arms and waited for Kakashi to perform the summoning jutsu. Kakashi did just that, and when the dust cleared, 8 dogs of various shapes and sizes appeared before them. Yo. What is it you want from us this time, Kashi? Pakken greeted. Kakashi was about to get down to business when a giggle escaped from Obito, who looked to be trying hold all of his chuckles in. Something wrong, Obito? Kakashi deadpanned. Obito waved dismissively. No, I'm just remembering that one for later. Obito made a sort of strangled noise as he tried but failed to contain his laughter. Kakashi sighed and went back to ignoring him. Anyway, yeah, I need you to help me ambush some enemy ninja, Pakken. We're trying to take down support troops and this one has 10 members to it. Think you and the rest of the pack can distract most of them while we take on one each? Pakken shrugged. Consider it done. Kakashi nodded gratefully and was about to contemplate a strategy when Obito ran up the boulder they were hiding behind and sort of made the decision for him. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Obito declared from atop the boulder. Kakashi face-palmed but ran with it. He emerged from his side of the boulder and rapidly ran through the hand seals for his new favorite technique. Lightning style. Lightning beast running. Smoke kicked up, but unlike last time, there were only 2 casualties, surprisingly. Kakashi and Obito learned this when a giant earth dome had been erected in retaliation to their assault and two of the stone nin had failed to get within the dome in time. "Ka. They are just a bunch of brats, like Juzo said." One stone nin cried. "This'll be quick," another stone nin muttered. "Don't let your guard down," a stone kunoichi warned. "A scout recently reported that our support groups are being taken down." "Enough." A well-toned man with a black beard rumbled. "Wipe them out." The stone nin jumped into action and that's when Kakashi's pack emerged from behind the boulder. In response to this, the stone nin at the back of the group halted and utilized a jutsu. Camouflage jutsu. And just like that, he vanished from sight. Each of the dogs went after each of the stone nin, Pakin went after the camouflaged one, and Kakashi, Rin, and Obito selected random stone nin to go after. Once the children were within range, however, a stone nin kicked away the small dog attacking him and punched the ground. Earth style. Erupt. At his words, the ground rose up unevenly and Kakashi, Rin, and Obito were sent flying, along with two of Kakashi's dogs that dispelled. With two stone nin free to attack now, they went after Kakashi, Rin, and Obito. Obito was the first to recover, but he wasn't the target of either man. Obito threw a shuriken, aiming for one of the stone nin's backs, but he nailed the man's ankle instead. Infuriated, the man whirled on Obito and charged him. When the man became close enough, Obito ran through the hand seals and used the Uchiha trademark jutsu. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Needless to say, the man did not survive. The enemy charging Rin had lowered his guard just as he got close to her and paid the price as she sliced through the tendons in his lower leg with a kunai. The man fell to the ground in deep agony and Rin didn't hesitate to end his suffering. She made his death as quick as possible by making a deep cut in his throat. Kakashi, Rin, and Obito gave meaningful glances to each other and then leaped back into battle. Kakashi's dogs had managed to slay two stone nin with their canine teeth, but that still left four stone nin to deal with. Kakashi got behind one and charged at Chidori, but his target unexpectedly moved at the last moment and Kakashi ended up dispelling another of his dog's summons. The stone nin then harshly kicked him in the ribs, knocking him to the ground in the process. The stone nin hovered over him and sneered. "You're Haddock's brat, ain't ya? Juzo's gonna be mighty pleased." Kakashi attempted to throw a kunai at the man's face, but suddenly, someone or something stomped on that hand and Kakashi cried out in pain. The camouflage jutsu gave way, revealing another sneering stone nin. "I am Atsushi, I'll be able to get back at Haddock through his brat, so let's get out of here." After having said that, Juzo smacked Kakashi hard enough to knock him out and then slung the young Haddock over his shoulder. "But what about Jin and Hachiro?" Atsushi asked. "Leave them," Juzo said blandly. "Jin's the leader, but I don't care." This turned into another clusterfuck. If Jin lives, he lives. None of the other brats were particularly alluring. "Did you deal with the mutt tailing you?" "Duh. Mangy Mud almost blew my cover, but I took care of him." "Fine, let's get out of here." The two stone nin disappeared via Shunshin, and Obito and Rin were none the wiser due to still dealing with Hachiro and Jin. Obito eventually nailed Hachiro with a fireball and moved to help Rin and half of Kakashi's pack corner Jin. "Fucking brats," the well-toned man cursed. "The hidden stone's still going to win this war. You best sleep with one eye open from now on." After those last words, Kakashi's pack tore into Jin savagely. Obito and Rin winced at the brutality of it but didn't move to stop the dogs. "Well, that wasn't too hard," Obito said, hands on his hips. Rin looked around and didn't see Kakashi anywhere. "Kakashi?" Rin gasped, realizing the implications. Obito whipped around but didn't see him either. "Where?" And then it hit him as well, and Obito wanted to kick himself for letting his guard down like that. The enemy got Kakashi, didn't they? Rin held a hand over her mouth and silently nodded. "We have to find him, Obito." Obito counted the bodies of 8 stone nin and then nodded at Rin. "Two got away, but we still don't know where they would take him." Obito turned to the dogs and raised an eyebrow. Can you guys track his scent?" The dogs sniffed the air for a minute or two and then the short gray dog gave Obito a reply. "Sure can, kid. Come on." Thanks, what's your name?" "Shiba, kid." Shiba replied. Then he motioned to the other 3 dogs with his paw and this is Bull, Urashi, and Garuko. "Now let's hurry." Obito and Rin didn't need to be told twice and so the 4 ninja hounds and 2 chunin raced off to find their commander and teammate. With Minato, Nagato, and Jiraiya. Minato swiftly cut through random stone nin with one of his specially made kunai knives. The battle had been going on for the better part of a day and shinobi were still arriving from the hidden stone village. Kitsuchi had been the main issue so far, but there were rumors that Rashi was on his way. As he stood there, pondering who to go after next, Minato suddenly felt some sort of premonition and he just knew something bad had happened to his students. He just didn't know what exactly. "Come on, Minato," Jiraiya called from atop of Gamabunta. Minato shook his head to clear away his foreboding worries. If his students needed him, he would definitely come when Kakashi threw that kunai knife he'd given him. He just hoped he wouldn't be too late. But the stone nin. Atsushi and Juzo were racing to the hidden stone with Kakashi still draped over Juzo's shoulder. The terrain didn't change very much and it was largely flat earth. The two stone nin weren't even halfway to their destination before Juzo sensed the leaf nin on their trail. Juzo growled at that. Atsushi. The brats finished gin faster than I thought they would. It's time for some landscaping, if you know what I mean. Atsushi's eyes widened minutely as he realized what Juzo was implying. Smirking, Atsushi rapidly ran through many hand seals and declared, Earth style. Earth in labyrinth. And then Atsushi slammed his palm down on the earth and a great labyrinth arose that towered over Atsushi and Juzo. That drained a ton of my chakra, Atsushi complained, massaging his arms, which were now aching. But it should hold them off for a little bit. Juzo rolled his eyes. Not for as long as you think. Leaf nin haven't survived this long because of stupidity, you know, let's move. And with that, the two charged ahead. And a few minutes later, Obito, Rin, and the ninja hounds reached the labyrinth set up for them. Arg, we don't have time for this. Obito whined, quickly realizing the structure they entered was a labyrinth after taking 2 turns. Rin looked up and noticed there was no ceiling. Going through it will take time, but going over should take no time at all, right? Obito blinked in surprise and looked up. Hey, you're right. Heh. Good thinking, Rin. Obito gave her a thumbs up. Rin beamed at his praise and then they ascended the wall by channeling chakra into their feet. The dogs followed soon after, bouncing up the walls. Once they'd reached the top, the 2 Chunin and 4 ninja hounds raced across the top and crossed the labyrinth in just a few minutes. Once they reached the other side, Obito and Rin followed the ninja hounds and ran after the stone nin. Up ahead, Juzo growled irritably when he felt the presence of the leaf nin drawing closer and closer to them. Atsushi. I want those brats gone. No more stalling tactics. Juzo roared. Atsushi sighed dramatically but complied with Juzo's request. Fine. Atsushi stopped in his tracks and got in a fighting stance while Juzo dashed on ahead. A few minutes later, the runs showed up along with 4 of the blasted dogs. It's one of the stone nin, I've got this. Shiba cried as he lunged at Atsushi. Atsushi roundhouse kicked the dog, dispelling him. Next thing Atsushi knew, he was tackled by the big black bulldog, Bull. I've got this one. You 4 go on ahead. Bull said from where he was sitting. The man tried to get up, but Bull growled lowly and that was enough for the man to stop his attempts at getting up. Obito, Rin, Urashi, and Garuka ran on ahead, having barely stopped to clash with the stone nin. Roughly 10 minutes passed by and the 2 Chunin and 2 ninja hounds caught up to Juzo, who was still legging it. Oh, come on. Juzo screamed. He screeched to a halt and faced the incoming brats. I didn't think you brats would chase me this far. This brat must be really important to you, huh? Juzo said this while jerking his head at Kakashi, who was slung over his shoulder still. Obito growled at the stone nin. If Kakashi back, you bastard. Juzo then gave a sick manic grin. Okay, sure, why not? Juzo abruptly slammed Kakashi's body on the ground and in the next second twirled a kunai knife in his hand and stabbed the boy in the chest. Rin gasped and Obito stared at the scene, aghast. Obito was speechless. Kakashi. Rin shrieked. Satisfied that he got such reactions from the brats, Juzo stood back up and crossed his arms in front of his chest. If you don't want your friend killed, I suggest you leave now. I can't guarantee what will happen next. Unless you want to die, too. You can all be together again in the next life. Juzo chuckled darkly at his own joke. Obito clenched his fists. Never had he been so angry in his entire life, never. Not even Kakashi drove him to this point of pure unadulterated rage. He glared coldly at Juzo and didn't care to find out why his eyes felt bizarre at that moment. Rin, I'm going in, stay here. Obito ran at Juzo and this caused Rin to panic. Obito, stop. Rin cried out. Juzo manically eyed the Uchiha running at him. Sure, let's dance, brat. It's time you learned the futility of your situation. Juzo took out another kunai from his pocket pouch, aimed it at Kakashi's head and threw it down. He was shocked when a kunai that Obito threw intercepted his. TCH. Obito finally reached Juzo and started throwing punches. It took Juzo some effort, but he managed to block the enraged Obito's blows. But then Obito abruptly delivered a sucker punch to his gut and then to his face when he bent over. Juzo flew back a few feet and landed on his back. After taking some calming breaths, Obito knelt down by Kakashi to get a look at him. After doing so, he turned to Rin and called her over. Rin. Come and get Kakashi medical attention. He's fine. Rin appeared immensely relieved, but when she saw Obito's eyes through his goggles, she gasped again. Obito. Your eyes. Obito blinked and lifted up his goggles, feeling his eyes concernedly. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with my eyes? They're Sharingan, Rin replied in amazement. Obito couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Sharingan, Obito thought to himself and then hollered, yes. And pumped his fist in the air victoriously. Rin rushed over with Urashi and Garuka right behind her. It was when Rin was checking Kakashi's injuries that Juzo sat up again. "You fucking brats," Juzo spat, wiping the blood trickling from his nose. He then stood up and declared, "You'll die here, I promise you." Seeing the object of his rage getting up again, Obito ran at Juzo without a second thought. Spitting a fireball at the stone nin would not be satisfying enough. That man had to die slowly, and darn it, Obito was going to enjoy every second of it. Knowing he wouldn't have time to perform a jutsu, Juzo met the young Uchiha in a taijutsu battle again and actually enjoyed the rush of it all. He really set off that brat. "Ha. You're good for a laugh, Uchiha brat, I'll give you that," Juzo jeered. He roundhouse kicked Obito a few feet back and then made a hand seal for a jutsu. Suddenly, there were 3 of him, the original and 2 rock clones. "Let's see you handle this, Uchiha brat." "Stop calling me that," Obito roared, charging the stone nin again. He blocked punches from the 2 Juzo on his right and left and aimed for what he thought was the original with his punches. "You will die." Juzo's clones grabbed Obito's flailing arms and Juzo cackled as he brutally punched him repeatedly. "Maybe I will, but it won't be by your hand, Uchiha brat. Maybe I'll take your eyes as souvenirs, though." "No." Juzo continued cackling madly until Obito's flailing legs landed a solid kick in his crown jewels, which made him wince terribly. "You little bastard, that's it, your eyes are mine, you little shit." Obito didn't relent in his resistance. He would get free, somehow. But before Obito could contemplate that, Juzo's face paled for whatever reason. Obito soon found out why, though. From Juzo's perspective, he was about to wail on the Uchiha brat some more when he noticed some weird kunai sailing his way. And the next thing he knew, the yellow flash guy was there, twirling the kunai around his index finger. He threw the kunai at one of his rock clones, and then he brought out another one to take out his other rock clone, thus totally freeing Obito. Once Obito had regained his bearings and freedom, he turned around in time to see his sensei, just before he used the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport next to him. "Sorry I'm late, Obito." Minato beamed down at him. "Sensei." Obito finally found his voice. Minato turned his attention back to Juzo. "I don't know who you are," Minato admitted as he dug into his kunai pouch. His face hardened. "But you've been threatening my students, and that will not be forgiven." Juzo panicked and he pointed accusingly at Minato. Why you're the yellow flash." Not quite thinking straight, the man ran through a hand seal sequence that Minato recognized. Minato then noticed that Obito had stood back up and he was going through a different, but still familiar, hand seal sequence as well. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. After Obito had unleashed his fireball, Minato quickly grabbed him by the shirt, threw one of his specially made kunai in the direction of Kakashi and Rin, and hurriedly grabbed them too, and then vanishing from the area just as the man declared his final jutsu. Earth style. Destructive rising rock pillars. The fireball burned Juzo to death and his final jutsu caused 3 pillars to rise up from the earth and cause huge aftershocks. And just like that, it was over. Over in a flash. We did it. Obito cheered once he realized Minato had gotten them to safety with the Flying Thunder God technique. They were a fair distance from the big battle that Jiraiya, Nagato, and many other Leaf Shinobi were fighting against Shinobi from the hidden stone, but it was still visible. He pumped his fist in the air triumphantly. Rin couldn't help but smile. They had done it. And there hadn't been casualties, though there had been a couple of close calls. She looked down at Kakashi, who was now sitting up. He had thrown the kunai that sensei given him in the hopes that he could help free Obito, and in a way, it certainly did. But it was sensei that did the saving, not him. Kakashi reluctantly laid back down at the insistence of Rin as she healed his injuries. Once he was fit once more, he would insist that they finished their mission. Kakashi Haddock would not settle for anything less, especially not without Rin and Obito at his side. They were a team. 2 days later, Team Minato reunited again in the Leaf Village after Kakashi, Rin, and Obito had taken out the final 2 support groups and they met up at their usual training ground. "So, it sounds like I missed a lot, huh?" Minato smirked a little at the mixture of bashful and prideful faces in front of him. "Anything that could have gone better, Kakashi." Kakashi exchanged looks with Obito and Rin and then rubbed the back of his head. "Nothing in particular, sensei. Teamwork improved over the course of the mission, Obito awakened his Sharingan and I gained some new jutsu." Obito laughed. "You totally spam the lightning beast running technique. You haven't even tried the others yet." Kakashi smirked behind his back. "And you spam the fireball jutsu. Why mess with success?" Obito rubbed the back of his head and Rin shook her head. "Because being a one-trick pony can get you captured or killed." Kakashi seemed to mock consider that and chuckled a bit. "I suppose these are the end times." Obito smirked. "Kakashi is lightening up." Kakashi dully stared at Obito at that comment. "Really? You're never going to let that go, are you?" Kakashi sighed when Obito shook his head and cackled gleefully. "Anyway, I guess you could say that this was an eye-opener for me. I could be strict about it and push myself to my limits, but that would distance myself from you guys. I realize now I can't do everything by myself, no matter how hard I try. If the situation had been reversed and one of you guys had been captured by the enemies, I don't want to think what kind of decision I'd have made under those circumstances. You guys could have continued on with the mission and allowed me to be captured, but you came after me. Obito snorted. Of course we came after you, dummy. Didn't you learn anything from your dad? Comrades come before the mission. Kakashi looked Obito in the eye. It said that those that break the rules are trash, though. Obito locked eyes with the Kakashi. And those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. Come on, Kashi. Get with the program. Kakashi laughed lightly at that, but didn't debate it. Rin giggled as the exchange came to an end. Obito's right. These are the end times, if you guys are done fighting already. We're not that bad. Kakashi and Obito said at the same time, but then looked away embarrassingly as Minato and Rin shared a laugh. Once the laughter died down, Minato concluded their debriefing of sorts. I'm glad you two are getting along better. I honestly thought this mission would have possibly ended up worse, what with the way you two used to go at it. Kakashi ran his hand through his hair. I'm still a bit upset that we missed our initial mission by the way, who ended up taking that one? Minato shrugged. I'm not sure. The mission to destroy Kanabi Bridge was urgent, and so when another team walked in ready to handle another mission, Lord Hokage handed off that one, even though we were supposed to take it. Rin tilted her head to the side. Wasn't there an Uchiha on that team? I swear I saw an Uchiha amongst that team. Obito sweated a little, but quickly regained his composure. Anyway it's over now, and I'm sure that mission was completed, just like ours. After all, they had. Obito abruptly stopped himself and coughed into his fist. So who's for ramen? Ms. Kushina invited me out. The rest of Team Minato eyed Obito curiously as the topic of their initial mission came up, but decided to not question Obito further on it, as it seemed to make him uncomfortable. If only they had continued probing at an unknown location. The young Uchiha child cracked his eyes open in the dark cavern that he was in. He soon realized that he was all bandaged up now and that he was on a bed. He weakly spoke as he attempted to sit up. Where am I? His attempts to sit up were a failure, but his question did not go unanswered, at least. At the crevasse between your world and the next, young Uchiha, a distinctly old and decrepit voice cryptically replied. Years later. Epilogue. The Third Shinobi World War raged on for years to come. Battles grew more intense, and legends were made for future generations to admire and fear. Desperate grabs of power were made, some resources were lost, and some were gained. The Age of the Bloody Mist truly gained its notoriety in this war. In a mad scheme to eradicate the Leaf Village, the Hidden Mist kidnapped Rin Nahara and turned her into the Jinchuriki of the Three Tails, setting the seal to release the moment she set foot into the Leaf Village. But Kakashi Haddock and Obito Uchiha would not be deterred from saving their teammate. It is said that Obito Uchiha gained his Mangekyo Sharingan through this incident, while simultaneously saving his teammate and wiping out the Anbu from the Hidden Mist that followed Rin on the pretense of recapturing her. After that incident, Jiraiya of the Sannin fixed Rin's seal so that she could still be a citizen of the Leaf Village. And that is how the Leaf Village came to be in possession of two Jinchuriki. After that last-ditch effort, the Hidden Mist closed itself off from the rest of the world, and the final events of the Third Shinobi World War took place a scarce 3 months after that. The Hidden Sand was the first of the Great Five to drop out of the war. This took place only months after Team Minato's first mission led by Kakashi Haddock, and even then, the negotiations for its surrender were heated. In the end, the Leaf extended its protection to its fellow Great Hidden Village, at least until a new Kazukiage was selected. The major reason that the Hidden Sand participated in the war in the first place was to take back its third Kazukiage, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Their third Kazukiage was heralded as their strongest Kazukiage since the village's conception. After all, it was only natural they wanted him back. After Sand and Mist were taken out of the race, the Hidden Stone was the next to go. With the war in decline, the Leaf Village was only fighting on two major fronts. Stone and Cloud. The Leaf poured her resources into taking out the Stone first, and then they reached a stalemate with the Hidden Cloud. The Leaf situation was dramatically improved with their newest Jinchuriki, Rin. Soon after the stalemate between Cloud and Leaf had taken place, a new armistice was written up between the Great Five Hidden Villages. Not everyone was totally satisfied, but the Tsuchikage and Reikage agreed that the provisions all around were better than the last time. And so the Third Shinobi World War drew to a close. There was still animosity and grudges, yet the armistice was in place. No one was in a rush to start another war so soon after the last one. At the same time, odd-lasting friendships were made. Unknown location. It appears we're all being called back. A young male voice broke the silence. A young boy stared up at the tall blue man in front of him. Thank you for giving me a chance. The blue man chuckled. Well, it's not often I run into someone as honest as you, kid. The blue man looked up at the moonlit sky. Perhaps this world isn't totally filled with liars. The young boy raised an eyebrow. I'm glad I've convinced you of at least that much. The young boy paused. What will you do when you return? The blue man shrugged. Probably go back to the same old, same old. Lord Mizukage's just bitching about the loss of a tailed beast, probably. You don't hold it against my village, do you? Nah. It was my village's idiotic decision to try and go for that. I could care less about Jinchuriki. I just want to have a good time, I don't care who lets me cut loose, I'll go rogue if I have to. The young boy continued to stare up at the blue man. It creeped the blue man out at first, but he got used to it pretty quick. He was just a kid, but he was a lot better company than most people. Well, if you ever need help, I will do all that is within my power to do so. The blue man simply shook his head in amazement. Why would you do that? I'm the enemy, aren't I? We don't have to be enemies. The young boy ominously stated. You may have detestable hobbies but you are not yet hopeless. Just remember that the world isn't completely filled with lies. The blue man shrugged nonchalantly. Like I said, at least you're honest. I suppose I'm glad I didn't just cut through you and move on. I guess I'll see you around. The young boy closed his eyes and then reopened them after a few moments. Farewell, kiss him. Later, Itachi. I'm pregnant, you know. Nagato blinked confusingly from the porch that he was seated at, actually relaxing for once. Something he hadn't been able to do in excess since the Third Shinobi War had begun. What? Nagato started, standing up and walking into the house. Minato was already there, as was Kushina. Nagato wore a casual gray karate top, gray pants, and white socks. Minato wore just the blue shirt and pants that he wore under his flak jacket which was absent on him that day, and Kushina wore her traditional high-collared, sleeveless white blouse under a green long, loose-fitting dress. Nagato noticed that Minato appeared as floored as he was, if not moreso. I'm going to be a father, Minato murmured softly. I'm going to be a mother. Kushina restated, confirming that they had not heard wrong. I'm going to be a father. Minato now sounded like he was warming up to the idea, even smiling now. A mother? Kushina screamed with delight. I'm going to be a father. Minato was grinning like a fool. Nagato couldn't help but smile at the couple. Congratulations. It was the least he could offer them. Kushina hadn't forgotten he was there, though, in all the excitement. And you're going to be an uncle, you know. Kushina grinned slyly at her cousin. Nagato grinned sheepishly now. I don't know, there's doubts about us being that close in blood. I'd make a terrible uncle. Nagato tried to get out of it, but Kushina wasn't having any of it. Uzumaki blood ties are strong, you know. You're going to be an uncle. Kushina insisted. When Nagato opened his mouth again to try and argue against it, she put her hands on her hips. Uncle. Okay. Nagato gave in and laughed lightly at Kushina's stern look. When's the special day? October 10. Kushina pleasantly smiled, glad that Nagato accepted the role of uncle. Minato was still coming to grips with his new fatherhood status, and so he remained unable to speak. What's the plan for telling all our friends? Nagato queried. I'm sure Yahiko Konan, Jiraiya-sensei, and your team will want to know, Minato. You just leave that to me. I want to keep this as a surprise for as long as I can, you know. Konan and Rin are going to want to know as soon as possible, Nagato amusingly replied. Minato finally recovered enough to speak. Lord Hokage will probably want to keep your pregnancy under wraps, considering your status, Kushina. Solemn silence fell after Minato pointed that out, but Nagato quickly reassured his cousin. Still, there are some people that she won't be able to keep it a secret from, Minato. Those are the people we want to inform. We're not planning on bringing the whole village into this. Minato nodded in understanding. I know. I would just like to okay it with Lord Hokage before telling anyone. That's all. Nagato gave a small smile. Alright, that's reasonable enough, I suppose. Are you okay with that, Kushina? The Redite asked, turning to Kushina. Kushina puffed out her cheeks, crossed her arms, and turned to the side slightly. I guess you didn't tell anyone yet, right? Kushina. Minato asked hesitantly. Of course not. Kushina exclaimed. I wanted you guys to be the first to know. I rushed straight back here and didn't stop for anyone, you know. Nagato's sweat dropped and held up his hands placatingly. Minato's just making sure, Kushina. Nagato smiled disarmingly. You get overexcited at times, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Well, most of the time. Name one time I got overexcited. Definitely the time you gave Danzo Shimura. Explosive literature. Minato laughed lightly. You do get pretty trigger happy when it comes time to celebrate the anniversary of the Uzumaki compound. Nagato tapped his chin thoughtfully. So I get a little wily on that day, Kushina stubbornly replied. You tattooed some truth seal on Fugaku's arm on his birthday, Minato deadpanned. One that didn't allow him to lie all day. I don't see how that's bad. Lying's wrong, you know. Yes, but you did pick a particularly bad day to do that prank. He was grounded for a week after he confessed to some things Nagato felt obligated to point out. And you were cackling gleefully as you watched as much of the show as you could. Minato reminded her. Kushina once again puffed her cheeks and turned to the side stubbornly. Spoil sports, it was funny, you know, she huffed when they laughed at her expense. Still, Kushina's pregnancy was big news. They would soon have a little ball of energy scampering around the house. The three of them couldn't wait. And then it hit Nagato and Minato. They shivered in dread. The next 9 months were going to be interesting. 9 months later, day before Naruto's birth, Obito stood in front of a grave. Various emotions crossed his facial features as he stared down at it. He eventually settled on a smile, albeit a sad one. I guess I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I couldn't keep it from you, Obito began, taking a deep calming breath. Lady Kushina is pregnant and she'll be expecting soon. I know you didn't know her well, but she's the girlfriend soon-to-be wife to my sensei. Looking up at the sky remorsefully, Obito let out another sigh. I'm no good at this, sorry. You'd expect this kind of thing from Kashi, not me. Letting out a shaky breath, Obito turned away from the grave. I came to terms with my mistake long ago, don't worry. I only visit his grave on the anniversary of his death now. I'm still sorry for your loss, he would have been the best, I just know it. I'm gonna go now. Just wanted to talk, since it's been a while. See ya, Kagami. Obito leaped away from the grave. The name Kagami Uchiha was in plain sight on the grave marker. Fall leaves blew past the grave and a cloaked man leaped down and knelt in front of the grave. A few seconds later, the mysterious stranger left wordlessly. A little while later, Obito met up with Rin and Kakashi at Ichiraku's. Sorry I'm late. Obito gave his usual greeting. I was visiting someone, right? Kakashi raised an eyebrow at his teammate, his mask now covered his left eye. Stalking me again, Kashi? Obito deadpanned. Kakashi eye smiled. Nope. You just happened to pass by my house on the way to the cemetery. Saw you when I was leaving my house. Ah. Obito sat down and ordered a bowl of miso. Rin leaned against the counter and stared at him. It's really not your fault, Obito, you couldn't have known. Rin began, but Obito interrupted her before she could continue on. I'm over that. Mostly. Obito grudgingly admitted. I was visiting someone else, not him. You never do get over it when you lose someone, Kakashi noted. I don't remember my mother, but hearing about her from dad is enough to make me miss her. Just don't let your emotions overwhelm and control you. I know. Obito huffed. I just had to stop by for a visit today. It only lasted a few minutes. Sheesh. Rin smiled serenely. You have gotten better about those visits. It's when you obsess about them that concerns us, Rin added. Leave the grieving and sulking to Kakashi. I do not sulk. Kakashi narrowed his visible eye at his teammates. Rin and Obito shared a laugh as Kakashi glowered at them. You're a perfectionist, Kashi. Obito asserted. You sulk when the tiniest thing goes wrong on a mission. Obito was not impressed when Kakashi stared hard at him with a strange glint in his eye. Let me show you how much I sulk right now. Obito waved dismissively. Sparring's not a good idea right now, Kashi. Maybe nothing will happen, but I'd like to be ready should anything happen, if you know what I mean. Besides, I don't want to see you sulk, no matter how much you enjoy it. Kakashi looked pleadingly at Rin. Can I just kill him now? Please. Rin sighed, massaging her temples. No, Kakashi, please. I promise to only maim him. No. Make him limp for a week. No, just one punch. Rin was about to retort when their orders finally arrived. Thank you for the food. The three Jonin chorused and dug into their food. As they were eating, Konan walked up to the stand, which made Obito turn around. What's up, Koko? Obito asked, food in his mouth. He gulped it down and smiled nervously when she stared at him sternly. Sorry. Lord Hokage wishes to speak to you about your next mission, Obito, Kakashi. Oh. I had off for the next couple days still, Obito whined. How am I supposed to see Lil Naruto if I'm on another Anbu mission? You asked for it by joining up with Anbu, Obito, Kakashi dryly directed at his teammate. Turning back to Konan, he asked, Minato-sensei would like to see us now, then. Konan gave a simple nod. As soon as possible. You may finish eating, but Lord Hokage would prefer none of your usual shenanigans. Konan gave a small smile when Obito pouted and Kakashi hunched over dejectedly. Turning to Rin, she said, and Lord Third and Lady Bawako would like to speak to you about something in private, Rin. Head to the Saratobi compound when you finish your meal. Message delivered, Konan turned into individual sheets of paper that turned into butterflies and flew off. Obito shook his head at her departure. I gotta get me something flashy like that, Obito grumbled. I didn't think much about paper before I met Coco, but now I can see just how awesome that stuff is. I could like turn into a bunch of paper hawks and fly off. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at him. Using a transportation technique that can place you anywhere you want to be isn't good enough for you. Kamui is pretty awesome, if you ask me. Obito scrunched his face up and thought. I guess. Still not as flashy, though. Flashy can get you killed. Kakashi deadpanned. Unless you're Master Jiraiya or Konan, of course, but even they have to be careful. You still haven't told me how Obito got the Mangekyo Sharingan, Rin mused thoughtfully. Obito grinned nervously and waved his hands frantically. You don't need to know about it, Rin. It's over and done, and I'm more awesome now. A Kakashi had to be grievously wounded before you awakened your normal Sharingan, Rin pointed out. If the Mangekyo Sharingan is the next level, then it was a total misunderstanding. Not a lie. And it happened a long time ago. Actually, it was only a couple years ago, wasn't it? Kakashi mused and then nursed his shin when Obito kicked him roughly. Shut it, Kashi. Rin continued to look deep in thought. A couple of years ago, you guys are talking like it was the time I. Before Rin could finish her thought, Obito abruptly stood up and yanked Kakashi up as well. Well, look at the time. Gotta go. Without saying another word, Obito used Kamui to get him and Kakashi to Minato's office, leaving Rin there looking concerned. Became a Jinchuriki, Rin said barely above a whisper. She leaned on the counter and reminisced on that time. It wasn't exactly the most pleasant time for Team Minato. The next day, Minato gazed out at the village warmly. The village was bristling with energy and everything seemed perfect. The Third Shinobi World War had taken its toll on the Leaf, but it still survived another war. That was reason enough to celebrate, in Minato's opinion. It had been 3 years since that war had reached its climax, it was winding down now. Village relations weren't perfect, but at least they were bearable. The most promising prospect in Minato's eyes was the Leaf's pact with the Hidden Sand Village. These talks had gone extremely well, whether it was because of the loss of its third Kazekage or the fact that the Leaf proved its dominance against all odds, no one knew for sure. But relations between the two villages had never been better. Minato became the fourth Hokage after his outstanding heroics in the Third War that was almost guaranteed for the blonde Namikaze. The only other contenders for the title were Orochimaru and Tsukumo, but Tsukumo governed the Hidden Rain village and Orochimaru, well, he had been suspicious lately, still loyal, but he had been ducking away somewhere. That left only Minato, in the eyes of people. Minato, naturally, disagreed. The people wouldn't acknowledge him as a Hokage candidate due to his being an immigrant, but Minato strongly supported Nagato's nomination for the Hokage's seat. In the end, Nagato stayed out of the Hokage race and happily remained as Minato's second-in-command, at Minato's insistence, of course. Minato allowed this for now, but one day, he would name Nagato as his successor, whether he liked it or not. The people would have to acknowledge him one day. He was already making slow, steady progress on his major opponents, namely Danzo, Kaharu, Hamura, and Fugaku. It was easy to see that they were still wary of the Rinnegan bear, but they were much friendlier than they were years ago when Nagato first arrived. The office door creaked open. Lord Hokage, preparations have been made. Speak of the devil. Nagato, what have I told you about honorifics? Minato said in a clipped tone without turning his gaze away from the village. Nagato rolled his eyes and grinned a little. Well, you are the Hokage, Lord Minato. Come on, Kushina is waiting. Minato groaned theatrically and used his Flying Thunder God technique to appear menacingly in front of Nagato. After this is over, we're going to have another little talk, oh loyal subordinate of mine, Minato groused. Of course, by talk, he meant spar. And by spar, that now included high-level jutsu. More often than not, those spars ended in draws and would require them to clean up any mess that was made as a result of their fights. Kushina might not approve. Nagato trailed off ominously, which would often earn them both Kushina's wrath for fighting such high-level battles so close to the village. But really, it was all in good fun, and the two weren't going serious on each other, well, not overbearingly, so Kushina needed to lighten up a little, but neither would dare say that to her face. Minato chuckled. You'd be in just as much trouble. Nagato shook his head and smirked. Not if you're the one who instigated the fighting. I'll claim self-defense. Minato paled and shook his head vigorously. Alright. You win this round, but I'll get you back later. Secretly, the two went and picked up Kushina. The plan was to deliver the baby outside of the village. Before they would take her outside the village, however, the third Hokage wished to elaborate on the plan personally, so the two took her to the Sarutobi clan compound. Kushina, there is something I must explain to you about giving birth. Hiruzen Sarutobi began. He and his wife sat across from Kushina while Minato stood by her side and Nagato stood off to the side. It happened to Lady Mito, the previous Jinchuriki, too. And it's very likely that little Rin will go through something similar. During Lady Mito's labor, the nine-tailed seal was nearly broken. I'm sorry, but as a precautionary measure, we're going to ask you to deliver the child somewhere away from the village, inside a barrier. Minato smiled at Kushina and put a hand on her shoulder reassuringly. We have the seal to think of, so I'll be accompanying you, too. And Nagato will be there, in case of the worst-case scenario. We hope it won't come to that, though. Minato and Nagato shared a meaningful look, while Nagato nodded minutely. Hiruzen's lips curved upward as Kushina grinned at Nagato briefly. Yes, Minato, Nagato, and Taji from the Anbu Black Ops will be there, and I'll send my wife, Bawako, to be with you, too. This is to be done in the utmost secrecy. Naturally, I will assign more bodyguards, but they will be Anbu Black Ops under my direct orders. Minato placed a hand on top of Kushina's right hand and the other stayed reassuringly on her shoulder. I'll go on ahead and prepare everything. Alright. Kushina let out. Minato turned to leave, and Nagato followed Minato without a word. It was best for Kushina to travel there with as few people as possible, so as to not arouse suspicion. "I will take you there," Bawako said, standing up. Kushina didn't react beyond watching Minato and Nagato leave. Kushina grinned sheepishly. "Oh, yes. I appreciate it." Outside, the sun was setting when Bawako and Kushina made their way through the village. "We should go soon," Bawako emphasized. Kushina couldn't agree more. "Yes." As they passed a raven-haired young woman in a gray shirt and blue skirt holding a baby, Kushina slowed down and said, "Oh my, was it a girl?" The young woman smiled at Kushina as she admired the baby. "It's a boy. So cute," Kushina squealed. To the baby, she asked, "What's your name?" "His name is Sasuke," the young woman clarified. Bawako came up to the pair and couldn't help but smile. "Oh, so he was named after the father of the third Hokage." The young woman confirmed this. "Yes, so that he will grow up to be a strong and fine shinobi. You will be giving birth too, right, Kushina? You should pick a name in advance." Kushina nodded and stroked Sasuke's head. "I already have. His name will be Naruto. You'll be classmates, Sasuke, so be friends, okay?" Leaning into the young lady, Kushina nervously asked, "By the way, does it really hurt?" The young woman playfully smirked. "So there's actually something that scares you, Kushina?" "I'm surprised." The Wacko huffed slightly and pulled Kushina along. "Let's go, Kushina." "Oh, yes. See you again," Kushina said, waving to the young lady. "The details of your birthing are supposed to be top secret," Bawako pointed out as they kept walking. "Until we get to our location, you must avoid any contact, even with your friends." Kushina rubbed the back of her head embarrassingly. "Yes, I'm sorry. Since we're trying to leave the village secretly, if your labor pains begin, try not to cry out loud." "Oh right." Thankfully, they left the village without further incident. "However, it hurts, you know." Kushina shrieked and screamed at the top of her lungs. They were now in the process of delivering the baby. "I've never seen Kushina in so much pain," Minato lamented as he stood by Kushina's side. Nagato was standing against the wall near the entrance to the cave, his face showed concern for his best friends. "Is she alright?" "She's alright," Bawako said. "Never mind that. Just stay focused on the nine-tailed seal." Minato tried to argue, Kushina looked and sounded like she was in such excruciating pain. "But you're the fourth Hokage. Act like one," Bawako snapped. A man would have dropped dead from such pain long ago. "But women are strong." Minato was forced to focus on the seal when it started acting up. "He's so strong the nine tails is struggling to get out." Minato clenched his teeth and took another look at Kushina's pain-stricken face. "Hang in there, Kushina. Hang in there, Naruto," Minato said out loud. Nagato smiled warmly at the scene. His friends would pull through. Though something captured his attention, he wasn't sure what, but something appeared to be amiss. It was just a premonition, however, nothing concrete. Nagato's gaze traveled to the entrance of the cave. "Is somebody here?" Outside, Nagato's fears were very real. A man in a dark cloak finished choking the last Anbu and set him down in the water. Once he finished taking out the Anbu, the man looked up at the entrance to the cave, revealing an orange mask painted with black flames and two eye holes. Then the man walked over to the cliff face and mysteriously disappeared. Back inside, the procedure was nearly complete. "I can see his head." "You're almost there, Kushina. Hang on, Kushina." Taji comforted her. The nine tails struggled with all its might. "Naruto. Come out quickly," Minato called, putting as much strength into reinforcing the seal. "Nine tails, you stay put." With one last cry, Kushina finally gave birth. A baby's wail now rang through the room. "Hot water," Bawako ordered. "Right." Taji complied. Nagato tensed slightly. Something still wasn't right. But what was it? A foreboding feeling made his body tingle, but even then, Nagato couldn't help but be happy for the new parents. Meanwhile, Kushina visibly relaxed and Minato had bulging eyes. "He's born," Minato murmured. Naruto continued to cry loudly and the moment got to Minato, making him weep tears of joy. "I'm a father today. He's a healthy baby." Bawako cooed, making her way to Kushina, Taji right behind her. Minato attempted to reach for Naruto, but Bawako sternly rejected his advance. "Don't touch him. The mother sees him first." Kushina tiredly but gladly looked at her newborn son. "Naruto, I finally get to see you." Bawako then carried Naruto off to the next room. "You'll have lots more time later." There Bawako comforted the blonde babe. The foreboding sense never left Nagato. In fact, it intensified, for whatever reason. And then he felt an unfamiliar chakra signature very close by. Nagato ran after Bawako and Taji, leaving Minato and Kushina alone. "How are you feeling, Kushina?" Minato placed a hand on top of Kushina's right hand. "Okay. Thank you." Minato beamed. Minato punched his palm enthusiastically. "Alright. I know you've gone through childbirth, but I'm going to completely seal the nine tails. Before Minato could even begin to do that, however, Naruto's cry and Bawako's scream caught Minato off guard, and he glanced away that Bawako, Taji, and Nagato had gone. Thankfully, Bawako only seemed to be injured, thanks to Nagato's foresight. Taji, however, wasn't so lucky, as she lay on the ground unmoving. Nagato clutched Bawako and set her down gently. I couldn't save them all in time, I'm sorry, Nagato apologized. Upon seeing Naruto in the masked man's arms, he realized what Nagato meant. Minato's full attention was on the masked man now. Fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze, get away from the Jinchuriki. Otherwise, this child's life will end in 1 minute. The masked man threatened coldly. And Nagato Uzumaki, you would do well to stay where you are. Nagato clenched his fists and his teeth grinded together. If only he had been faster. Minato fixed the masked man with a calculating stare, his mouth making a thin line. How did he get past the barrier? This guy, who the hell is he? Kushina's seal weakened further, and Minato's attention was called back to her. Kushina. The nine-tailed seal is still. Minato couldn't even finish that statement in his head. The masked man fluidly brought out a kunai from his sleeve and pointed it at the babe in his arms. Get away from the Jinchuriki. The masked man ordered. Don't you care what happens to your child? Minato's head shot up to the masked man again, and he held up his hand, panicked. Wait. Calm down. Speak for yourself, Minato. I'm as cool as can be. After saying this, the stranger tossed Naruto up into the air. Knowing that Minato would go for Naruto, Nagato went straight for the masked man without hesitating in the least. Unfortunately, the masked man vanished before he could land a single blow via a special shunshin that required no hand seals and reappeared right next to Kushina. Nagato attempted to use his diva path to attract the man towards him, but the masked man simply used that special shunshin again and reappeared on the other side of Kushina when Nagato's jutsu ended. Then, in the 5 seconds it took for Nagato to use the diva path again, the masked man scooped up Kushina and flickered away. Shunshin. Nagato wondered pensively, he'd never seen someone as proficient at using that technique. He hadn't even had to use hand seals. However, he didn't get to ponder for long. Minato firmly grasped Nagato and used his Flying Thunder God technique to quickly leave the cave as the intruder had attempted to blow them all up by planting explosive tags on the cloth that Naruto was wrapped up in. Thankfully, Minato had noticed in time, had discarded the cloth, and had even managed to save Nagato and Bawako from a fiery death. Now outside, the explosion completely wrecked the site and only Minato suffered a slight injury. Bawako was out cold but seemed okay for the most part. Nagato slowed his speeding heart and turned to Minato, who was now holding a naked Naruto in his arms. Minato, I'm sorry. Minato sighed and removed a piece of wood that was lodged in his ankle from the explosion. It wasn't your fault, Nagato, you did what you could and even managed to save Lady Bawako's life. Without you, I don't want to know what would have happened. I'm just glad that Naruto is safe and sound. Although now that monster has separated me and Kushina. He got what he wanted in the end. Nagato stood up, made 2 shadow clones, and one of them picked up Bawako in his arms. We'll get her back. My shadow clones will get Lady Bawako to safety and warn Lord Third while I handle searching for Kushina and that man. What will you do now, Minato? Minato sighed wearily and hugged little Naruto tightly. After I get Naruto back home, I'll make preparations to reseal the 9 tails. No doubt that man will unleash the 9 tails now, even when you show up. We need to be ready. If you could, I'd be grateful if you could possibly stall that man's advance. He'll most likely target the village with the 9 tails after releasing it. Nagato agreed with the logic. Very well. I will do what I can. I can't guarantee that I will be able to lay a finger on the man, for whatever reason, he can use the shunshin without hand seals. He is a most troubling opponent. Minato frowned thoughtfully. That is a troubling ability, but like I said, even just stalling would be a tremendous help. I know I can count on you. Nagato smiled meekly, but accepted his brother's faith in him. The feeling was mutual. Good luck. Nagato and his clones ran off to complete their duties. Minato used his Flying Thunder God technique to return himself and Naruto home. And then he got to work, donning his 4th Hokage jacket in a dramatic way. Nagato's clones finally reached the village and then split off. The one with Bawako made his way to the Sarutobi compound while the other sounded the alarm at Anbu HQ. Bawako hears and murmured. Nagato's shadow clone had hastily knocked on the door to the main building of the compound, careful not to drop Bawako. Hiruzen hardened his gaze at seeing his wife unconscious. Explain what happened, Nagato. As quickly as you can. Then Nagato's shadow clone did. As of right now, my original self is searching for the intruder in Kushina and another clone is raising the alarm at Anbu HQ. Minato is preparing for the worst case scenario. I will do all that I can to stall this man, but you must prepare the village, Lord Third. Not even I will be able to hold back a tailed beast forever, especially not the strongest of them. Hiruzen nodded gravely and moved his wife to one of the couches inside. Very well, Nagato. Thank you for your promptness. I will prepare the village as swiftly as possible. I will send Yahiko and Konan your way to assist you. Nagato's clone gave a small grin and then dispelled, his task complete. The original received these memories just as he located the masked man's whereabouts. It's now or never. Nagato thought this as he witnessed Kushina chained up and looking utterly miserable. The seal was weakening, dangerously so, and the masked man appeared preoccupied with releasing the 9 tails. Taking out a kunai and sticking an explosive tag to it, Nagato effortlessly threw the kunai at the back of the man's head. This action seemed to be anticipated, however, as the man suddenly vanished by Shunshin and reappeared in the same place a couple seconds later, resulting in the kunai damaging one of the pillars holding up Kushina. Nagato wasn't all that surprised when the masked man vanished from view and reappeared behind him. Nagato dodged the attempted stab at his back and quickly pushed him away. Almighty push. This time, the masked man did go flying and it was a fair distance away. Nagato hurried over to Kushina and attempted to free her from the pillars, but it was to no avail. Brad and Minato isn't here, so he can't close up the seal. Nagato instinctually dodged 3 kunai thrown at him and slid into a defensive stance. Of course the masked man would come back from one simple attack. You don't seem to understand the gravity of the situation, the unknown man mused aloud. It's much too late for you and that pathetic disgrace of a village to do anything. The 9 tails is nearly free and when it breaks out, I will take it by the reins and crush it. Nagato frowned. What do you have against the leaf and how did you know to attack at this precise moment? It was at this time that Nagato noticed the 2 glowing red eyes behind the man's mask. Sharingan. Well now I suppose I can't give away too much after all, even though the leaf murdered your parents, you're still aligned with them. The man smirked victoriously behind his mask when Nagato's eyes flashed with anger. But I will fill you in a little. I am Madara Uchiha and the 9 tails' rightful owner. The leaf abandoned me and so I suppose that I am repaying the favor, just a little. Nagato narrowed his eyes. The leaf didn't abandon you, legends say that you betrayed us first. And even if you are Madara Uchiha, who is dead, I will not let you harm the village. Nagato created 2 shadow clones and got ready to attack the masked shinobi, while 1 shadow clone freed Kushina. The masked man sked and aimed his pointer finger at Nagato. You are a curious fellow, Nagato Uzumaki. If I were you, I would crush the Leaf Village with your gifted eyes. They murdered your parents and they shamelessly assaulted your home country. Why would you side with them? Barely lifting his other arm, the masked man shot out some projectiles that pierced the heads of both shadow clones. Nagato clenched his fists and forced himself to remain calm. He created 10 shadow clones this time. My reasons are my own. Jiraiya-sensei was the first Leaf Shinobi to ever reach out to me, Yahiko and Konan, and he allowed us to stay here. During my stay here, I have seen that the Leaf has suffered as much as my homeland. They didn't have to, but they helped overthrow Hanzo. My homeland is now recovering thanks to the Hidden Leaf, and I owe them my life for that. I will not allow you to bring harm to it. Having had enough banter with the mysterious Uchiha, Nagato rushed the man, expertly twirling a kunai after whipping it out of his pocket pouch. The man leaped back twice into a tree and lifted his mask slightly. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. Nagato witnessed the hand seals in time and stopped in his tracks as the fireball surged forward at him. Dropping his kunai, Nagato held out his hands and absorbed the ridiculously large fireball and absorbed the attack without saying a word. However, this proved to be a distraction, as the Uchiha only wanted to get at the troublesome shadow clones that were getting too close to the Jinchuriki. Leaping out of the tree and dashing at the crowd of shadow clones, the man shunshined once he was within arm's reach of the first clones and appeared right next to one of the clones that was unfastening a chain on one of the pillars. He kicked the startled clone harshly and made it dispel. Wasting no time, he unleashed a barrage of shuriken that dispelled the clone working on the other pillar. The other 8 were not just sitting around as this happened, however. One clone maneuvered behind the masked man and bound him by snaking his arms beneath the masked man's. Then, he started absorbing the chakra of the Uchiha. Do this, the man grunted at being captured. What if I were to tell you that I could help you use those eyes to their full potential? The masked man's eyes held amusement in them now. Nagato had visibly faltered at that declaration. That's right. There are still secrets to those eyes that you are not aware of. I know them all. The real Nagato narrowed his eyes suspiciously and approached the bound man as his clones worked on releasing Kushina. And how would you know anything about them? The last person to possess these eyes was the Sage of the 6 Paths. The masked man scoffed and chuckled darkly in amusement. Do you really believe that? You are not the second to wield those gifted eyes, my boy. I, Madara Uchiha, wielded them long before you. It is thanks to me that you have them at all. The masked man jeered. You did not inherit them biologically, I gave them to you as a gift when you were but a baby, so that you might one day repay my kindness by helping me. My goal is to bring peace to this pitiful world, after all. Nagato continued to eye the man suspiciously. The man's chakra level was going down, but it was far from drained. Say I believe you. If you really gave me the Rinnegan, why would you do this? You are still alive, are you not? That I am, the masked man conceded. But I have grown weaker over the years. I could not keep the Rinnegan because it would end the immortality that I have worked so hard to attain. My plans would be accomplished quicker with them, but I need many years to accomplish my goals. I cannot cut corners. And so I presented them to you, a native of a land that the land of fire has desecrated for centuries, with so much innocent bloodshed. What are your plans, then? Nagato asked carefully. He did not like where this was going. Rather than answer Nagato's questions, the man swiftly did a back kick that dispelled the shadow clone holding him. Nagato moved to respond to this, but the man already had enough freedom and whipped around and shot more of those strange projectiles from out of his sleeves, which dispelled 5 more clones, easily. The 2 remaining clones dodged the projectiles sent their way and hurriedly resumed their work of freeing Kushina. The original Nagato, meanwhile, pulled the masked man toward him. Universal pull. The masked shinobi hadn't turned back around in time to counter and so was forced to be dragged Nagato's way. Nagato moved to stab at the man as he inched closer and closer, yet at the last second, the man shined away and appeared atop of one of the pillars. The masked man spread his arms out theatrically. I will assemble the greatest sources of power of the nations and create a never-ending peace. If you join me, I can elaborate on it more, but only if you are with me completely. Nagato hesitated. His clone succeeded in undoing one of the chains, but then were promptly dispelled by the man's strange weapons. He was going to question the man further on his plan,